Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek The Next Generation, The Genesis Wave, by John Vornholt. Read by Tim Russ.
Waves lapped delicately at the blue pebbles and copper-colored sand of the lagoon, while ferns waved in the scented breeze. Beyond the shore stretched an endless turquoise sea filled with whitecaps dancing to the music of the waves. The sun felt good on the old woman's wrinkled skin. It seemed to penetrate into her aged bones and joints, making them feel good too. She bent down and ran her hand through the copper sand until she uncovered a tiny filament no wider than a hair. She was 135 years old. Or was it 136? She often lost track in this sunny paradise. Her digging didn't stop until she had unearthed 7 of the delicate filaments, and she hunched over to study them more closely. None of these are damaged. The old woman sighed and replanted the delicate fibers in the sand. She stood up, groaning at the creak in her back. I should take my medicine. Computer, erase that last sentence from the log.
Sentence erased.
Is anybody really listening to me? Does anybody care that I've turned this entire beach into a giant solar energy collector? And I did it without upsetting the ecosystem? Is everybody in the Federation just trying to humor an old lady? Once again, no one answered. The computer back in the lab was simply capturing her remarks in a log to be transmitted to her correspondents in other locations. She missed having live colleagues around. Oh, they came to visit every so often, but they seldom stayed for long. They were intimidated by her bodyguards and her monastic lifestyle, neither of which were her choosing. Her isolation in the watery expanses of Pacifica wasn't due to her experiments. It was necessary for that other part of her life. She was a prisoner of the past, still suffering from acts of pride, ambition, and selfishness. They'll be glad when I'm gone. Then they can stop protecting information they don't even want to know. Dr. Marcus? Carol Marcus whirled around to confront the youngest and newest member of her 4-person Starfleet security detail. Don't sneak up on me like that. I'm sorry, Doctor. You sounded distressed over the comlink, and you were talking to yourself. I was not talking to myself. Of course, Doctor. It's just that with our sensor array down from the recent storm, we have to be extra careful. What exactly do they think is going to happen to me out here? It's been 90 years since the incident, and no one has come after me yet. Someday I'm just going to blurt out everything I know, and you people can spend an eternity guarding each other. The ensign blanched and took a step back. Please, Dr. Marcus, I don't want to know anything about what happened to you, or why you're here. The old woman gazed wistfully at the pastel ocean. I used to think that children would read about me in their science classes, but no. They wiped all traces of my early work from Starfleet records. It's all too dangerous, too controversial. Could you please offer an old woman a steady arm for the walk back to the lab? Gallantly, the officer extended a brawny arm, and she grasped it with relief. How many hundreds of security officers had drifted through her life in the last 90 years? What did they think about their time spent with the mystery woman of Pacifica? In the first years of her banishment, she had gotten too friendly with a few of her guards. The truth was, she had been grasping for tenderness and forgiveness in the wake of her son David's death and the spectacular destruction of Project Genesis. Jim Kirk had disappeared again, and there was no one to console her while they erased her life's work from recorded history. She noticed something odd on the ground. It looked like a sprig of moss, and she bent down to pick it up. The waxy gray sprig was unlike any vegetation she had ever seen on the island. She dropped the sprig into an empty pocket on her jumpsuit and stepped toward a double door. Carol Marcus strode into the common room of the big house, as they called it. 2 other guards were seated at the card table, playing a game of 3-dimensional chess. Carol Marcus yawned broadly and made a decision. I'm going to take a quick nap. Her guard nodded with approval. We'll have lunch ready for you when you wake up. Lying in her bed felt as luxurious as lying in a weightless mud bath on Rigel 2. Marcus felt all of the worries of her pain melting away as her body sank into the mattress. I don't know when I've ever been so tired. Then a warm hand touched hers. Stirring gently from her dreamy reverie, Carol Marcus looked up to see the most wonderful sight in the whole world. David! Her son's angelic face was framed by unruly blonde curls. She lifted a trembling hand to touch his face. Certain there would be nothing to feel but an old woman's illusion. To her astonishment, her hand touched real flesh, and she ran her fingers over his nose, mouth, and eyes. David, you... how? David cupped her hands in his. Don't worry about that now, Mother. The universe is full of strange and wondrous things. I'd like to show them to you. Are you ready to leave this pointless life behind and come with me? Father is anxious to see you too. Jim Kirk. But he's dead. You're both dead. I killed you, David. David stroked her matted, ivory hair, the child comforting the mother. Suddenly Carol looked up and gazed out the open door toward the common room and saw the guards lying on the floor. What's the matter? David touched her lips, silencing her. Nothing is the matter. Not anymore. It's taken me a long time to find you, Mother, but now we're going home to finish your work. David's solid arms reassured her, and she surrendered to her bliss. Her consciousness seeped away until all she felt was oblivion. The yacht races on Pacifica came to an exciting conclusion today as the Gemini won for the second year in a row in the freestyle category. With fireworks in the everywhere, signs proclaimed Happy Terran Day, a celebration marking the day when the first human colonist had arrived on Saren to join the Camerites, Deltans, and other species. Aurora Square was filled with shoppers and revelers picking up fresh produce, spices, gifts, and tasty delicacies for the holiday dinner. Mikel Gordonez hefted a melon from a nearby stand and sniffed its dewy freshness. I'll have to try to catch that yacht race. I'll come back to the club tonight and watch it. Leah Brahms lifted her blue eyes from a selection of squashes and tubers and looked curiously at her husband. Lately, Mikel had been coming to the planet's surface almost every night, frequenting his athletic club. Why would you want to watch a yacht race from the other side of the quadrant? Mikel scowled and walked away from her. If you don't want me to come to town tonight, just say so. Leah followed him through the throng. They had a ton of work left to do, and he was acting as if they were on vacation. Leah Brahms and Mikel Gordonez were respected scientists, known to everyone on the planet as the landlords of Outpost Saren T1. She realized that she didn't want to start an argument in public, surrounded by hundreds of residents of the capital city. Why does he want to watch a yacht race when we're in the middle of running tests? He's just trying to get away from work, she concluded. Or me. Maybe I should be the one who changes, she thought with a start. Maybe I should watch the yacht races. The truth was, everything revolved around work, even her marriage, which probably made her boring. There had been moments of unwanted attention, such as Geordie LaForge's crush on her. At least that was over and they had become friends. But who could make time for romance with a husband or anyone else? Yes, I'm boring, she decided. If I'm boring to myself, what must I be like to Mikel? He looked at her. Listen, Leah, why don't you come to the club with me tonight? You don't get out of the lab enough. All right, I will. Here, Mikel, help me carry this stuff. Mikel nodded. Are we about done shopping? I think so. If not, we'll make do. Leah suddenly felt a sort of panic, realizing that the entire day would be lost to shopping, and who knew what else. Mikel, let me just check in. She tried to ignore the way Mikel smirked and rolled his eyes at her attention to duty. Hendrickson here. Leah knew every nuance of voice and mannerism in her assistants, and she sensed that Ellen Hendrickson was upset. What's wrong up there? Well, it's the test site. The civil guard showed up an hour ago, and they've held up our tests. Paldor is trying to talk them out of it, but they won't budge. They say we're not allowed to use radiation with any of the local subjects. Mikhail yelled angrily over Leia's shoulder. That's the whole point of it. What's the matter with those rubes? Leia gripped her husband's hand. Maybe we should go there. Get ready to receive us. Leia was soon dragging Mikhail and all their packages through the crowd to a transporter kiosk. Mikhail looked ruefully at her. Did anybody ever tell you that you're a slave driver? All the time. On the outpost Saren T1, Leia stepped off the transporter platform, feeling a bounce in her step from the decrease in gravity. Mikhail stumbled off the platform and promptly dropped all of their packages. Ellen Hendrickson rushed toward them, waving a pad over her head. I've got the site permissions, environmental studies, and waivers right here. Leia took the handheld device from her. She glanced guiltily at Mikhail, who was chasing a rolling melon across the cargo bay. Ellen bounced over to the transporter console and busied herself checking coordinates. Mikhail stood up, rubbing his back. Something tells me that tonight will be another meal from the replicator. Leia shook her head. Not if I can help it. Let's settle this bit with the Civil Guard once and for all. Leia Brahms climbed back onto the transporter, her jaw set resolutely. With a shrug, Mikhail dutifully followed. Energize, Miss Hendrickson. A moment later, Leia and Mikhail materialized in a meadow on the outskirts of the capital city. 16 tall coral pillars stood at the center of the meadow, forming a circle around a clearing. The pillars had been built to resemble the fertility temples of the Deltans, so as not to disrupt the natural beauty of the meadow. But this was no temple. It was a monitoring station. The pillars housed test equipment, scanners, monitors, force field generators, and a particle accelerator. In the center of the pillars stood what appeared to be a white sculpture representing a humanoid. In fact, it was a bulky radiation suit, and it was empty. Standing beside it was a young Deltan woman, wearing an oversized robe and a chagrined expression. Leia and Mikhail strode toward the gathering. Their assistant, a Tellarite named Paldor, was arguing vociferously with about 20 members of the Civil Guard. On a peaceful planet with no standing police or army, the Civil Guard was a volunteer organization that enforced laws. Sometimes they couldn't resist meddling. A tall, plumed Camerite approached Mikhail, looking very grave. This facility is not to be used for Class 3 experiments on an official holiday when the local citizens are endangered by their presence in the area. Mikhail's expression grew somber. Okay, we'll keep the locals away. We'd like to start by keeping you away, so please leave. The Camerite looked at the Deltan beside the radiation suit. She is a local, endangered by your experiments. Mikhail caught sight of one of the Civil Guards touching the radiation suit, and he rushed toward him, waving his arms like a madman. Get away from there! Do you know what this equipment is going to do? It's going to save hundreds of lives. No longer will Starship engineers have to risk their lives trying to save the main engines. In this suit, they can work in the middle of a distressed warp core, surrounded by antimatter leaks, and they'll be safe. It's got medical monitoring, life support, a communications array, and phase shifting. Every day we delay, lives are at risk. Leia cringed. The phase-shifting technology was supposed to be a secret, because they had cribbed it from the Romulans without their permission. An oscillating temporal displacement allowed the wearer to be effective in a dangerous environment, but slightly removed from it as well. On a much larger scale, the Romulans used the same technology to cloak their ships. Bounding on his feet beside her, Paldor could stand no more. The Tellarite's orange hair stood on end. You are delaying our work over a technicality. This test is perfectly safe, and we need a female subject. Leia Brahms laid a calming hand on his beefy shoulder. Don't fight with them, Paldor. Go back to the base and relieve Ellen. Send her down here. Then we'll have 2 females to finish the test, and none of them will be locals. Now get going. Paldor bowed politely to her, then swiveled on his heels and marched out of the clearing into the open meadow, where the transporter beam whisked his molecules away. Mikhail continued to argue with the Civil Guard while Leia unsnapped the collar of her tunic and began to take off her clothes. Mikhail stopped his pointless conversation with the Civil Guard to stare at her. What are you doing, Leia? I'm getting into the suit. A grin spread across Mikkel's face, and he turned to the civil guard. "Take your posse and go bother somebody else. We've got work to do." Within a few minutes, there was no one left in the meadow except for Leia, her husband, and 3 technicians. That number swelled to 4 when Ellen Hendrickson walked into the group. "Where is everybody? I thought we had a standoff going on." Mikkel proudly hugged his wife. "Nope. Leia took care of them." "Are you really getting into that thing?" Leia nodded. "For the first trial, then Ellen is going to take over for me." She opened the back of the suit like someone cracking open a giant lobster claw, then climbed in. She mashed her forehead against the clear faceplate as she shoehorned her limbs inside. The gel interior of the suit molded to the contours of her body, shrinking or expanding as needed. In the fingers of the gloves, she found the controls, and she turned the suit on. Leia felt a flash of claustrophobia when she realized she was completely encased, but she tried to breathe evenly and relax. She tapped her little finger upward, activating the medical artificial intelligence.
Systems are normal, Dr. Brahms. Your pulse rate is elevated. Would you like me to administer a mild sedative?
"No, thanks." She glanced up to see Mikkel striding toward her, adjusting his communications headset. "Are you all right in there?" "Just fine, Mikkel." Leia looked around at the brilliant blue sky, lush green meadow, and short-sleeved workers, thinking this really wasn't much of a test. Oh well. Starfleet wanted to see the results under every possible condition, including picnic weather. Mikkel's voice was in her ear. "Your medical data's coming through. Just relax, hon." Leia knew the power levels were good because she could see the readout reflected on her faceplate. "Computer, phase shifting on."
Phase shifting on.
The lack of any sort of sensation startled Leia, considering that she was wavering in and out of the temporal plane. She heard Mikkel say, "Let's do some dexterity tests. Ellen, toss her the ball." The young woman picked up a colorful play ball and stepped closer to the immobile white figure, tossing the ball with both hands. As it floated through the air on a high arc, the sky above them completely changed colors, shifting from a pale blue to a vivid green. A flaming curtain swept over the distant mountains, throbbing and mutating as if distorted by heat. The snowy peaks erupted in fury, disappearing into rolling clouds of ash and steam. The columns of readouts on her faceplate began to scroll at a madcap pace. As the ball hit the ground, it exploded, and the soil under her feet began to twist and churn. Leia looked up to see the ungodly wave pass over Ellen Hendrickson. Caught in mid-scream, her skin flared like fire and turned to mottled green before it liquefied. Tissue dripped off her skin, which became brittled and crumbled, and her body contracted into a brackish, quivering puddle. Eyes agape, Leia looked up to see Mikkel stagger toward her, the gruesome transformation already ravaging his body. "No! Mikkel! I'm hallucinating! Help me!" Leia staggered to stay on her feet. The ground was still erupting, shooting geysers and flaming green embers. She clomped forward, trying to reach her husband, but there was no trace of him in the churning, twisting inferno. She gritted her teeth and tried to hold on to her sanity as the ground convulsed all around her. "Leia Brahms, to Outpost Saren T1. Certain there would be no response, she jumped when she heard Paldor's voice. "Doctor, we've lost contact. What's happening down there?" "They're dead. All dead. I'm only alive because I'm in the suit. What hit us? Did you see anything on sensors?" An energy wave of some sort. It's past Saren on its way to the moon." "Paldor, beam me up, now!" "There's something wrong, Doctor. I can't get a lock." Leia tried to remain calm, even as slimy tentacles and vines curled around her feet, trying to absorb her into the mad convulsions of the planet. The wave might be causing interference, but their comm signal was strong. "Maybe it's the phase shifting. I'll turn it off." There was no point in thinking about what might happen. With a gulp, Leia flicked off the interphase generator. The soles of her feet started to smolder. "Now! Try it! Hurry!" When she materialized in the cargo bay, she found Paldor running around, stuffing tins of food into a shoulder bag. "Paldor, direct beam us to the shuttlecraft." The Tellarite rushed to the transporter controls and entered the coordinates. Then he leaped onto the platform. A moment later, they were deposited inside the roomy cabin of a Type 8 personnel shuttlecraft. Paldor immediately rushed to the controls, even though he was hardly a shuttlecraft pilot. Leia pressed the escape button for the suit. She pried her sweaty body out and dropped into the seat beside Paldor and punched the thrusters. Paldor opened the launch doors. Through the black expanse of space, they could see a rippling green wave reaching toward them. The shuttlecraft banked away from the shimmering curtain as it rippled across the moon, turning pitted rock into living tissue, pulsing with freakish energy. Leia watched this remarkable transformation in her view screen as she pushed the shuttlecraft to top impulse speed. "Getting ready to enter warp drive." Paldor cleared his throat. "Are you sure? I mean, there's no way..." "They're all dead, Paldor. All dead." Mikkel was gone now, and it was too late to do the things and say the things she should have said. Just like that, everything in the universe could be turned upside down, until nothing mattered but a moment's worth of survival. Paldor studied the scanner readouts. "I've never seen anything like it. It must stretch across 100,000 kilometers. Leia sighed and looked gratefully at the radiation suit which had saved her life. "I don't know what it is, but I've seen it up close. We've got to warn the Federation." Paldor was working the board. "That won't be easy. Our communications are out. The launch was a little rough." Leia nodded solemnly and stared out the window at the endless starscape. How many planets, stars, and moons would be consumed by the relentless force behind them? "The distress signal may still be working. We'll keep running until we find somebody." Paldor shook with fear. "Or until it catches us." Geordi LaForge checked the chronometer over the door to make sure it was time to quit. And it was. He rubbed his eyes, something he could do now that he wore ocular implants instead of a visor. He heard Data's footsteps a moment before he heard the android's clipped voice. "Geordi, you asked me to..." "I remember, Data. Time to knock off. Thanks for reminding me." Geordi strode into the corridor to the turbolift, followed by Data. Mission Specialist Dolores Linton stood inside the lift all alone. She was a few years younger than Geordi and quite a vibrant woman. He had no problem believing that she was a geologist who spent her life hiking and climbing. Data grabbed Geordi's arm in a vice-like grip and ushered him inside. "Specialist Linton, we were just discussing you. Commander LaForge was saying that he planned to come to my violin recital at 2200 hours, and he wondered if you would enjoy it." Linton glanced politely at Geordi. "Yes, I love violin music." As the turbolift door opened, Geordi managed to say, "I'll pick you up at your cabin 15 minutes before." As the door shut behind him, Geordi breathed a sigh of relief. He knew Data was well-meaning, but Geordi had been trying to improve his love life since he was a teenager, with very little success. He could be perfectly okay around women once he got to know them, but making small talk with strange women was beyond his ken. At the entrance to his quarters, he touched a panel to identify himself. He stepped inside a friendly suite of rooms that were decorated in the earth tones of Africa. Dark green, rust, red, and yellow. There were masks from Africa, but Geordi's art collection was eclectic, reflecting his taste in modern sculpture and mixed media works made from a variety of materials. Although he had just left a bank of view screens in engineering, he went immediately to his desktop terminal and sat down in his old armchair. "Computer, check new messages, personal file."
22 new messages.
Geordi kept scrolling down until his implants caught a name that stopped him cold. Leia Brahms. "Computer, play message 19. Leia's angelic face and form appeared on the screen, surrounded by the jumbled accoutrements of her laboratory. There was something new. A hulking white form loomed behind her. "Hi, Geordi. I've just got to tell you about the new project we've been working on. And thank you for sending the fresh kiwi. Mikkel strolled through the background. Her husband, thought Geordi with a pang. Leia had started to explain about the radiation suit standing behind her, but Geordi was so lost in his own thoughts, he didn't catch it. Freeze playback. Now Leia Brahms was frozen on the screen, looking both radiant and excited. This frozen image told Geordi all he needed to know about his love life. Not only had he made every possible wrong move with Leia, including turning her into a holodeck character, but he had fallen hopelessly in love with her, a married woman. Geordi shook his head, realizing he had only himself to blame. With determination, he had maintained a long-range friendship with Leia by concentrating on their mutual interests instead of his feelings, which he kept hidden. Rewind and resume playback. Geordi paid attention this time. Yes, the radiation suit. Sounded fascinating. Geordi, keep that hush-hush about the phase-shifting technology. Anyway, it's worked in all the trials, and we're doing more today. Soon her beaming face blinked off the screen, taking part of his heart with it. He sat back in his chair. Computer, record reply to message 19. Hi, Leia. And Mikkel? Everything's fine here. We're supporting a geological survey on Itomish 3 to see if it's stabilized enough to support a mining colony. It beats fighting a war. Data has a violin recital tonight. End transmission. Geordi tried to shrug it off, because, after all, Leia already knew he was a hopeless goof. He was thinking about getting a quick bite to eat when his computer interrupted him.
Reply to message 19. Leia Brahms at Outpost Serenity 1. Outpost not responding.
Geordi sat forward with interest. Well, that can't be. We've got 1 million relays out there. Why isn't the outpost responding?
No response from Sector 4368.
No response from the entire sector? What is the explanation?
None reported.
Keep trying. It looked as if his free time would include a trip to the bridge. Paldor, his snout flaring, sat in the cockpit of the shuttlecraft, banging on the star map on his console. But I tell you, Dr. Brahms, we can't let them all die. This Tellarite colony is right in the path of that thing back there, and we have time to go warn them. Besides, you say that you want to get word to somebody in the Federation. Leia gulped, wondering how far the big Tellarite would go to save his people. They still hadn't made their communications system work, although Leia thought the distress signal was getting out. Paldor, how much time do we really have? Paldor shook his bushy head with frustration. Its speed is variable, depending upon how many solar systems and dust clouds it has to chew up along the way. At warp speed, we were traveling about 3 times faster, so I'm sure we've gained some time on it. Paldor, do you think you can make your people believe their whole planet is in imminent danger of being destroyed? What choice do we have, Doctor? Leia nodded and glanced at the star map. Okay, I'm changing course for Hakon in the Hivernia system. Now transfer all the data we've collected onto an isolinear chip. We've got to make a record of what we've seen, in case something happens to us. She glanced back at the radiation suit. To protect it, we'll put it into the suit. The Tellarite frowned so deeply that his bushy eyebrows knitted together. Let's hope we get to Hakon in time. Leia nodded. Let's hope somebody listens to us. Dressed in a laboratory gown and wearing rubber gloves, Jean-Luc Picard carefully washed the clump of rock and sand with water and a small brush. The captain of the Enterprise liked working with his hands, and he could be infinitely patient when dealing with antiquities. Bridge to Picard. The familiar voice of Commander Riker was hailing him. Sorry to bother you, Captain, but we've got a situation. I'm on my way, number 1. A few moments later, Picard strode onto the circular bridge of the Enterprise and looked curiously at the clutch of senior officers gathered around the tactical station. Riker, Data, and LaForge. Status, Commander Riker. Well, as Mr. LaForge discovered, we've lost contact with almost an entire section of Federation space, 4368. That's fairly close to us, toward the center of the galaxy. Picard frowned. What about the ships in the area? We've tried, sir, but we can't raise any ships, outposts, or any relays out there. Unaffected areas nearby don't report anything amiss. Data looked up from the tactical station. The communications blackout spans several inhabited solar systems. Starfleet can offer no explanation. Geordi stuck his head up. We think we found a faint distress signal, but that's it. We can't even get a signature from it. Riker leaned over the small terminal built into the arm of the captain's chair. The last message from Starfleet is from Admiral Nechayev and confirms the communications outage. She says it's the captain's discretion to investigate, but please advise her of your decision. Picard rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Admiral Alina Nechayev. It was odd that she would be involved in such a day-to-day matter, since she was usually more concerned with counter-espionage tactics and secret missions. Picard felt the warning hackles rise on the back of his neck. Geordi, when you get a fix on that distress signal, use it for a course setting. Otherwise, pick an inhabited planet. Alert Starfleet of our intentions. Maximum warp. A dry wind crackled across the baked clay walls and rambling earthen dwellings of Peturgistan, the capital of Hakon's sole inhabitable continent. Although the earthen houses looked similar in color and shape, they were distinguished by curtains, banners, and laundry, and large, bright plaids flapping from every window and balcony. The Tellarites themselves wore these same kinds of brilliant, often clashing squares of color as they bustled up and down the rambling streets. At the capital's Cultural Affairs Center, a hub of interplanetary commerce, a bushy crown of salt and pepper hair towered above everyone. He was the lone Klingon, and the others gave him a wide berth. The Cultural Affairs attaché, Celia, guided the grizzled Klingon down the walkway. Maltz squinted into the bright sunlight, thinking that if he had any Klin at all, he would shake off this simpering flunky and crawl back into a dark tavern. But that old call to duty still stirred him, even though everything he did in this post was pointless. His keeper must have led him a merry stroll trying to sober him up. Well, it hadn't worked. He was still drunk. When did we lose? When did a pack of puny do-gooders take over our lives and heritage and turn us into diplomats? A whore you dress up and show off for dinner, not a warrior. But this is what I've been reduced to by the Federation. Celia laughed nervously as she tried to ignore the stares of passers-by. Why, sir, you haven't lost anything. The Klingon Empire is still as powerful and respected as ever. There is no way to die with honor anymore. No way to redeem myself. Although I should blame Krug as much as Kirk. Krug and Kirk? He shook his head miserably. Before you were born. Maltz finally had enough of this simpering lackey. He straightened his cloak and yanked his gleaming chainmail sash across his gaunt frame. Then he leaped up the stairs to the landing. He headed toward the refreshments, his nostrils flaring at the smell of food. As he mingled among the crowd, looking for servers with food, Maltz heard someone call him. It was Bekra, the Capellan consul and self-appointed social director of the diplomatic community. He turned around to face the elaborately dressed consul. Consul Maltz, we have some distinguished visitors from the neutral worlds. They are making a swing through the Federation colonies, discussing trade opportunities. We are so glad you could come on such short notice. Bekra introduced a grinning Orion, naturally, plus 2 unsightly Talavians, a bug-eyed Dopterian, a sinewy Mikulak, and a green-skinned Rutian. The names flew right out of Maltz's head the moment he heard them. Maltz took a long swig of ale and wiped the excess from his beard with the back of his gauntlet. He glanced at the Orion. How long are you staying on Hakon? Long enough, Consul Maltz, to see what the populace needs and what they have to offer in trade. The Orion visitor sidled up to his elbow. There's something familiar about you, Consul Maltz. Yes, It was probably 30 years ago when I was in the prison supply business. You were a bounty hunter." The Klingon's stomach heaved, and he felt the bile of almost a century of dodging the past come surging up in his throat. Maltz caught the snide Orion by the throat and lifted him off the tiled floor. "Yes, I've been a bounty hunter, and worse than that." It was then that the Michalak and the Dopterian attacked Maltz. It felt good to fight. There were no friends or enemies, just the enemy. He had to silence them all. Maltz barely noticed when the 3 beefy constables rushed in from the street and joined the fray. The old Klingon was still hollering and kicking when the exasperated constables leapt to their feet and drew their phaser pistols. Peace at last, thought Maltz, as his body stilled and consciousness drifted away. Consul Bekra was standing outside a holding cell and watching as Maltz shuddered awake and swung his legs over the edge of the bed and finally succeeded in sitting up. "Maltz, you had to go and smash up the Cultural Affairs Center. You're going to get a nasty bill. You'll be glad to know that none of our guests were seriously injured, and I think they relished the opportunity to tangle with a Klingon." "I'm gratified the tourists were happy. How long do I have to stay in here?" "You'll have to see the magistrate. I'll do what I can to move the process along." A Tellarite constable ducked into the room, looking as if he were trying to escape from the racket. Bekra turned to him. "What is going on out there?" 2 people have landed in a damaged shuttlecraft. They're claiming that some kind of strange energy wave destroyed Saren and is coming after us. Something about a green fire consuming the planet, turning it into sludge." Maltz nearly fell out of his bed as he rushed to his cell door, which was shimmering with a force field. "What did they say exactly? I've got to see those people." Bekra looked at Maltz. "You're in enough trouble." He turned to the constable. "Would it help if I talked to them?" Constable shrugged. "Well, they are asking to speak to important people, but we don't know what to tell them. They claim we have to evacuate the planet. As if we could." Maltz roared at the constable. "Please, I know what they're talking about." With a scowl, the angry guard pushed Bekra out the door. Maltz dropped to his knees, beating his fists against his craggy skull. "Listen to me. I know what it is." But no one was listening. Leia Brahms pushed up the sleeves on her jumpsuit and leaned over the desk to stare at an enormous Tellarite. "Listen to me, please. You've got to get ready to evacuate. How many space vehicles have you got?" The chief Tellarite raised his beefy hand and smiled condescendingly at her. "Now, what did you say your name was?" "Dr. Leia Brahms. I run the lab on Outpost Saren T1. I ran it before it was totally destroyed about 14 hours ago." The proctor shuffled papers. "So far, the only fact we know is that the 2 of you landed in a shuttlecraft, which isn't all that unusual." Leia turned with exasperation to her colleague Paldor, but the Tellarite was in shock. He'd had no idea that Hakon was such a sleepy backwater of a place. She could see from the despair on his face that he realized that all of these people were going to die, and no doubt the 2 of them as well. She turned again to the officer at the desk. "A subspace radio. There's got to be some way for you to contact other planets. We've got to warn the rest of the Federation." "The spaceport probably has that capability. So do the ships in orbit. It's about 50 kilometers on the outskirts of town." An elegantly dressed Capellan came over to them. "They can't help you. The spaceport is nothing but an automated system to handle our freighter and passenger traffic." Leia looked askance at the Capellan. "Who are you?" "Capellan Trade Consul Bekra, at your service." She gripped his turquoise collar. "Listen, Bekra. You've got to believe me. Everyone on this planet is going to die." "Do you have proof of this?" From the pocket of her jumpsuit, Leia removed an isolinear chip. I've got this, and another copy back in our shuttlecraft. But this is raw data. You'd have to spend some time analyzing it, and you don't have any time. You, your wife, your kids, your friends, you'll all be plants, some kind of creatures. The proctor jumped to his feet. Now, you listen to me. We've got a sensor warning system in place from the war, and it hasn't put out so much as a peep. Paldor shook his head miserably. It's pointless. You are all doomed. The proctor pointed toward the door. That's quite enough of that. Now get out of here, both of you. Bekra put a protective arm around Leia Brahms and led her out of the building into the street. Paldor stumbled after them and bumped into Leia. I'm sorry, Doctor. You were right. We should have kept going. I should get back to the shuttlecraft. I'll keep our sensors running. As Paldor left, Leia turned to the Capellan diplomat. Your ship. We've got to contact somebody. All I've got is a shuttlecraft, too. But there is a subspace relay to my home world. Will they believe me? Well, even if they do, what can they do to help? They're 2,000 light years away. Of course, there is somebody who might be inclined to believe you, but he couldn't do much to help you either. Why is that? Who is this person? He's another consul like myself, a Klingon. Unfortunately, he's a prisoner in the station we just left. But he's an old Klingon, and he thinks he's seen this energy wave of yours. Leia shuddered and looked back at the station. If there was any chance to find out more about that awesome force, she had to take it. Can we see this Klingon? The Capellan took her elbow and guided her back toward the station. I wish I weren't starting to believe you because you're frightening me. The half-dozen Tellarite officers in the waiting room regarded them warily as they approached the desk. The proctor tugged on his bristling orange beard. I thought I told you to leave. Our visitor. She thinks she may know Consul Maltz. When the magistrate does get here, I'll make it easy on everyone by vouching for Maltz and paying any fines. Can't you let her see him for a moment? Why should I? Leia stepped forward. Because I'd be willing to take Maltz off the planet, out of your hands. The Tellarite pointed a chubby finger at her. You'd better not alarm him, or get him riled up. Let them in. 10 minutes, no more. They entered a room that seemed even more clammy and oppressive than the waiting room. The 4 small cells were all empty except for the one on the end, where a tall, wild-eyed, bushy-haired Klingon stood, glaring at them. The Klingon cautiously approached the force field barrier. Did you see it? Leia looked at the Klingon warily. What is it? Describe it. His eyes blazed with remembrance. It sweeps across the land like a burning green curtain, ripping up everything. But it leaves new life, strange life, growing in its place. Yes. What is it? The Klingon glanced suspiciously at the Capellan. I shouldn't tell you. Your own government considers it top secret. Leia gaped at him. Are you telling me that we invented this thing? That it's artificial? Bekra was suddenly interested. Is it a weapon? Maltz shook his head. It didn't start out that way. You say they set it off on Saren? Nobody set it off. What you described sounds right, but this was an energy wave, moving through space. It hit Saren and all of her moons, and it's coming right this way, expanding as it goes. Maltz scratched his long white beard. Moving through space. Maybe they improved it. Leia stared at the Klingon. Who is they? Who controls this thing? Well, you do. You're the only ones who know the technology. Leia marched toward the door. You're wrong. Nobody would unleash this against their own people. Get me out of here, Bekra. He is mad. But at that moment, she feared the old Klingon spoke the truth. Dolores Linton was shaking Data's outstretched hand. The performance was lovely. The android was dressed in tuxedo and tails and looked very dapper, thought Geordi. To people who had never heard the violin played to weeping perfection, a performance by Data was like finding the Holy Grail. Data gave a slight nod of his head. When I first started, I broke many strings. That is the appeal of the violin, because it is so fragile. As Geordi and Dolores went toward the door, she turned to the engineer. I really appreciate you bringing me to hear Data play. Thank you for a great evening. Geordi stammered. I'm sorry it has to end so soon. Well, does it have to end so soon? I heard them say that we're not going to reach the area for about 10 hours. Yes, that's true. Let's have an early breakfast together. I'll give you a tour of the ship. Dolores softly touched his cheek and gave him a look of doe-eyed sympathy. Thanks again for the lovely evening. After Dolores Linton had gone, Geordi immediately hid his comm badge. LaForge to bridge. Have there been any developments? Riker answered. Well, one small one. We're now picking up a Capellan distress signal from a planet named Hakon, where the other distress signal is also coming from. They're the only clue that something is wrong. Geordi's brow furrowed with worry. As he strode toward a turbolift, he could almost hear Data berating him for his hapless handling of Mission Specialist Linton. This was all just one more reason to regret his obsession with Leia Brahms, an obsession which Data could never understand. Standing outside the open hatch of the shuttlecraft, Leia Brahms handed a pad to her comrade, Paldor. Here's your shopping list. If we can get these parts, I think we can fix the comm array. Looking dismayed, the young Tellarite glanced at her, and then at the gawkers who surrounded the vacant field where they had landed. I don't know where to begin. Come on, Paldor. It may be a farming community, but they're still part of the Federation. They must have antennas and dish arrays. Yes, Doctor. I'll be back as soon as I can. Maltz paced in his cell, suddenly more sober than he had been in the last 50 years. All he knew was that he had to get out of this place and help that poor, deluded human. Like most objects of true horror, the Genesis device was man-made. But who had control of it now? Who had turned it into an energy wave that could sweep across space? Although they had taken his knife, they had left him with his ceremonial chainmail sash, not knowing what a treasure trove a Klingon sash could be. From hidden crevices and folds, he drew forth part of his arsenal, a wad of gel explosive, knuckle armor, and a small signal mirror. He strolled over to the door of his cell and bent down, as if fixing something on his boot. Maltz knew that a force field wall was actually thousands of crisscrossing beams, and that a beam reflected back onto itself caused all sorts of havoc. Using his knuckle armor, he slowly pushed the mirror across the floor, probing for a blind spot between the emitters. Penetration in the right spot would change the direction of the beams just enough that they would strike the mirror on the floor and be deflected upward. When that happened, the force field would be attacking itself. He ran to his cot and grabbed his threadbare mattress. Holding it in front of him like a battering ram, the Klingon grit his teeth and charged the door of his cell. With a burst of smoke and sparks, the force field imploded. Maltz slipped the knuckle armor over his fist just as the outer door opened. The first one through happened to be the haughty Proctor, and he received a crushing blow straight to the snout. Before the big Tellarite even hit the floor, the Klingon had ripped the disruptor pistol from his holster. After Maltz slammed the outer door shut, he used his newly acquired disruptor pistol to drill a small hole about waist-high in a wall which abutted the outdoors. The Klingon stuffed his tiny wad of gel explosive into the hole he had made, and then he stepped back. With steely-eyed fearlessness, he adjusted the disruptor pistol to maximum and aimed at the charge he had planted. The hole blown in the wall was about a meter across, through which staggered the bedraggled Klingon, his clothes and facial hair still smoldering. He had to find the strange woman and her shuttlecraft. The Capellan consul would know where she was. Bekra was probably taking measures to save his own skin. That would mean a trip to the hangar where he kept his shuttlecraft. He had a long walk through back streets, but at least the sky was darkening. Soon it would be night on this part of Hakon. As Maltz pushed open the window to the cavernous shuttlecraft hangar, he could smell the scent of something burning. To no surprise, he saw the Capellan consul, Bekra, who was burning papers, transparencies, and isolinear chips in a trash receptacle. Maltz stepped out of the shadows. He kept the disruptor pistol trained on his old colleague.
Going somewhere, Bekra?
Bekra squinted into the wavering light. Is that you, Maltz? You don't need that weapon, my old friend. If you want to escape with me in my shuttlecraft, that's no problem. But I have to warn you, I don't have warp drive. Maltz stepped toward the small bonfire.
What are you burning up in that can?
Oh, nothing of interest. Bekra edged toward the open hatch of his shuttlecraft. The Klingon aimed his weapon at the Capellan's chest.
Stop there. So, who have you been spying for all these years?
Spying? You are getting melodramatic in your old age. Bekra bolted for the hatch. Maltz drilled him in the leg, shearing it off just below the knee. The Capellan dropped to the floor and writhed, gripping his burnt stump. The first aid kit!
You won't die, unless I have to shoot you again. Now, who do you spy for?
A ferocious wind ripped half the corrugated roof off the building, revealing a blazing field of stars in the sky. Maltz gaped at the hole in the roof.
The wind! The wind!
Leah Brahms felt the shuttlecraft shake as if it were being vandalized by a mob of hooligans. She charged outside, ready to give them hell. Instead, she was met by an icy blast of wind. She ducked back inside the shuttlecraft. Without even checking what set off the sensor alarm, Leia started the transporter sequence to lock onto Paldor's comm badge. The Tellarite appeared on the small transporter pad at the back of the craft, his arms full of electronic parts, which dropped to the deck as he shivered uncontrollably.
What's happening, Doctor?
Leia studied her readouts, and her eyes grew wide with fright.
Oh my God. The wave attacked the sun first, and it's eating its way around it. We've got to get out of here.
Paldor flapped his arms.
But all these people! If you want to stay here and die with them, get out now, Paldor. Otherwise, get in your seat and prepare for launch.
Leia put everything else out of her mind as she plotted a course for the heart of the Federation and set the computer to work on compensating for the wind. Moments later, the shuttlecraft was streaking over the tops of the earthen buildings, which were already beginning to crack and fall apart. In a panic, people rushed into the street, only to be blasted by the wind and flying debris. There wasn't anything anyone could do for them now. Maltz shook his fists into the savage wind as it wreaked havoc in the shuttlecraft hangar.
Yes, you Genesis Wave. You're a worthy adversary. Come and get me. Habshoshlik Koch.
Maltz strode toward the shuttlecraft and finally reached the injured Capellan.
You be straight with me, Bekra, or I'll leave you here. Understood?
Bekra lowered his head. Romulans. I send dispatches to the Romulans.
Romulans. I should kill you. But you brought the human to me.
Maltz grabbed the injured consul and threw him into his own shuttlecraft. The Klingon sat at the controls. The shuttlecraft zoomed straight up through the torn roof of the massive hangar. Finally, they broke through the stratosphere of the planet into calm sailing. Maltz turned on the sensors to take a look around. The first thing he picked up was a distress signal about 4,000 kilometers ahead of him, and he locked onto the signal and used it for a course heading.
Hello, fellow shuttlecraft. This is Consul Maltz and Consul Bekra on Bekra's shuttlecraft. We've gotten away from the planet, but we don't have warp drive. That's too bad.
Maltz recognized the voice of the human woman as she continued speaking.
I may save your worthless hides, but you'll have to play by my rules. I'll leave you here unless you give me your word that I'm the commander.
The Klingon clenched his teeth and slammed his fist to his chest.
I pledge to follow your command if we unite crews. But I must report to a Klingon base as soon as possible. Fine with me. Lower your shields and prepare to transport.
On the bridge of the Enterprise, Commander LaForge looked up from his engineering console.
Captain, the planet Hakon is cut loose with all kinds of distress signals and subspace chatter.
Data looked up from Ops. It appears as if the sun in that solar system is decreasing rapidly in temperature and size. One thing is certain. Unless the inhabitants of Hakon have a reliable shelter system, they are not going to survive the drastic changes in climate. Picard looked at the concerned faces all around him.
How many inhabitants?
8 million, sir. Most of them Tellarites. LaForge turned to Picard.
Captain, most of the messages from Hakon have now stopped.
Data cocked his head curiously. Long-range sensors show another planet in that system which does not match the description we have for it. SY-911 Alpha has an oxidizing atmosphere that it never had before. Picard gave his order.
Forward all of this data to Admiral Nechayev. Maybe she can make something out of it.
From the cockpit of her shuttlecraft, Leia Brahms looked around at her motley crew, consisting of a Tellarite who would not stop crying, a Capellan who was suddenly missing a leg without any explanation, and a grizzled Klingon who hummed happily to himself as he gazed out a side viewport. She recognized the need to communicate with this pathetic lot of survivors.
Paldor, give some first aid to Consul Bekra.
Behind them, Maltz was muttering to himself.
We've got to find out who set it off.
Bekra shifted in his seat.
Maltz has a theory that this is some sort of weapon. He has talked about a similar thing in the past.
When Paldor didn't move to help Bekra, Leia turned to the Klingon.
Maltz, can you pilot the shuttlecraft? Aye, Captain. They're all the same.
Leia rose to her feet and grabbed the first aid kit from the locker. She sat down to minister to Bekra's burnt stump of a leg.
How did this happen? I lost an argument to somebody who had a disruptor.
Maltz spoke up from the front.
What about this planet? Peleus 5. It's on our way. They've got 34 million inhabitants. We could be there in 6 hours.
Paldor glanced over his shoulder.
That planet isn't even in the Federation.
The Klingon scratched the white stubble on his chin and chuckled.
So, you can let them die if they're not in the Federation? You people are more practical than I thought. But we need to get help. But just so happens that the nearest place is inhabited. And by the graph you're running, I can see it's in the direct path of the wave.
Leia Brahms answered as she finished dressing Bekra's wound.
I saw the planet.
She stood and went to the cockpit. She looked at her new first officer.
If you were me, what would you do?
Maltz scowled.
It's clear you can't land on a strange planet out of the black and expect them to voluntarily leave their homes at a moment's notice. We need help. Where are the vaunted reinforcements of the Federation? It hit too suddenly, and we lost a lot of ships during the Dominion War. Plus, I hate to tell you, but this is a forgotten corner of the Federation.
Maltz pointed to his screen.
But many settled worlds lie in the path of this thing. If I'm not mistaken, expanding on your chart, one of the targets is Earth.
Leia leaned closer to the gaunt Klingon. She hadn't seen the latest updates on the computer projections. Yes, it seemed Earth itself was in the path of this awful scourge. The old warrior wrinkled his jagged brow. He pointed to the screen again.
The enemy is going to cut a streak through the Romulan Empire, too. I also know those coordinates.
Bekra suddenly sat up.
Did you say the Romulans will get hit, too? Are you ever going to tell us who built it and what you think it is?
The Klingon shook his head forcefully.
No. I will know the right person to tell, and it will have to be someone who can verify what I say. Now, do we change course for this planet, Peleus 5?
Reluctantly, Leia Brahms nodded.
Yes.
The Klingon growled in satisfaction.
Now all of you, sleep. I'll let you know when we get there.
In a sumptuously appointed stateroom on the Sovereign-class flagship USS Sovereign, the gray-haired admiral turned off her view screen and lowered her reading glasses. In her sharp green eyes was an emotion seldom seen there: fear. She had witnessed many extraordinary events in her long career, but nothing like these reports and fragments from the Enterprise. It was hard to believe that this bitter fruit had been planted only 6 months ago. Someone had been busy making use of what they stole. Nechayev to bridge. Set course for Solar System SY 911 in Sector 4368. Maximum warp. Alert the Enterprise that the Sovereign is en route to their general position, and tell them to keep sending me raw data. Nechayev out. Taking a deep breath, the wary Admiral activated her terminal one more time to send a secure message that would muster a large part of the fleet under some pretext and send it to the afflicted area. Unfortunately, she couldn't block out the knowledge that she had nothing in her arsenal which could stand up to what she feared was out there. Captain Picard peered at the view screen with concern, not because he saw something which looked amiss. On the contrary, this part of space looked oddly tranquil considering what it had gone through. Even the radically altered sun of System SY-911 looked like a natural part of the starscape when viewed from a distance of 2 million kilometers. Mr. Data, where do we stand? I would advise that we stop here. Radiation is very high. I would almost conclude that a massive fleet of starships had moved through here, expelling waste as they went. Except we know that did not occur. Some extraordinary event has taken place, although I am unable to say what it was. Picard was concerned that they knew so little about this deadly menace. Full stop. Data, prepare 3 probes. A solar probe for the sun and 2 Class 3 probes. 1 for Hakon and 1 for the planet with the strange readings. Data worked his board with fingers moving so swiftly they were a blur. Targeting probes. Probes launched. On the view screen, the torpedoes streaked from the Enterprise and disappeared among the distant stars and the pulsing red sun. Data addressed Picard from the ops station. Captain, the first probe should be reaching the particle field. That is peculiar. The probe ceased transmission. Data worked his board furiously. In fact, all 3 probes have ceased transmission since they entered the particle field just ahead of us. Some sort of energy wave is following the deuterium trails of the probes, right back to us. Without a moment's hesitation, Picard gave an order. Shields up! Picard looked up at the view screen to see 3 thin ripples, like green lightning bolts, come tearing from the darkness, headed straight toward them. The captain wasn't expecting much of an impact since they had their shields up, and he wasn't disappointed. He felt nothing, although it was disturbing the way the mysterious strands seemed to remain attached to the ship, trailing off into the distance like giant vines.
Hull breach on decks 11 and 12.
Data looked up. To be specific, the forward launch tubes. Repair crews have been dispatched to the forward torpedo room. It was running under automated control. No casualties reported. Picard strode to his command chair. Khan, take us out of here. Reverse course, full impulse. Let's see what it's like on screen. The scene switched to the cramped, elongated torpedo room. The bank of launch tubes were gone. Instead, there was an amorphous green glow around a jagged hole, which opened to the darkness of space, and the pulsing hole seemed to be growing larger. The scene turned hectic a moment later when a team dressed in environmental suits charged in with fire extinguishers and foam guns blazing. Data turned on the audio so they could hear the team.
What is that stuff? It's not working. Get a tricorder reading. Working on it, sir. It's organic. Protomatter. It's eating through the hull like acid. Ah! It's got me. It's all over me. I can't get it off.
The panicked officer staggered back from the breach in the hull. Picard could only see a bit of the glowing vegetation on him. More of the repair team seemed to fall victim. They began to tear off their environmental suits. His jaw clenched. The captain rose from his chair. Mr. Data, seal off the forward torpedo room. When some of the panicked repair crew tried to escape the corridor, they realized they were shut off. Meanwhile, the cancerous hole in the hull kept growing. Mr. Data, patch me into them. This is the captain. We are facing a quarantine situation in your position. He motioned to Data to cut off the transmission. Prepare to jettison the forward torpedo module. Deanna Troi sprang in front of him. But sir, there are 10 crew members trapped in there. We'll get them back. But we can't let that thing reach the main hull. Data, jettison the forward torpedo module. On the view screen, the crew trapped in the torpedo room suddenly became weightless, and their panicked thrashing increased as they floated helplessly. With a jarring shudder, clamps released and powerful thrusters shot the entire module away from the saucer section of the Enterprise. Data shook his head. Captain, life support is failing in the module. Prepare to transport them. Data, can we surround the transporter room with a containment field? That is inadvisable, Captain. If our battle shields had no effect on the intruder, we can assume our force fields would not either. Helplessly, the bridge crew gazed at the view screen. The trapezoid-shaped module was now misshapen and throbbing. Data turned to Picard. Captain, the comlink has gone dead. No life signs either. Picard slumped in his chair and stared at the green molten object on the screen. It almost looks alive. Data nodded. It is alive, Captain. The mass which was formerly the torpedo module has generated into simple life forms, which continue to evolve. Deanna Troi spoke up. What do you mean, evolve? Single-celled animals are in a rapid state of growth, forming more complex creatures as they develop. It's like 100 million years of evolution condensed into a few minutes. Picard was still staring at the screen. What is that thing? While Leia Brahms had been sleeping, Maltz had been looking at the parts that Paldor had collected. When she woke, the Klingon told her that he thought the comm array could easily be repaired, and Leia, because of her familiarity with the radiation suit, insisted she do the spacewalk. After floating in space for a while, cut off from her sullen crew, Leia Brahms began to relax and enjoy the excursion outside the ship. She had to do some drilling, bending, and creative kludging with advice from Maltz and Paldor. Maltz's gravelly voice came urgently over the intercom.
How much longer, Captain? It might work now, but what's the matter? That big asteroid belt we passed a while ago is gone, and there's something that looks like a new planet in its place.
Leia stuffed her floating tools and extra parts into a large net bag.
I think I've done enough for now. Reel me in, and make it quick.
Geordi LaForge dragged himself out of his bed at the first alarm. He didn't know offhand who was on that repair team, but he was sure there were people who had served with him in engineering. Despite the tragedy, it sounded as if the Enterprise had dodged a bullet.
Bridge to LaForge.
It was the familiar clipped tones of Captain Picard.
You might want to come to the bridge, Mr. LaForge. We think we may have found your mystery shuttlecraft. They are broadcasting information about the nature of this disaster.
I'm on my way. LaForge out. A few moments later, as Geordi stepped off the turbolift onto the bridge, he saw that the view screen was full of startling images. An entire planet wilting under vivid green flames. A shimmering curtain sweeping across space. A moon ripped apart by what looked like solar flares. He asked the captain, "Where's that coming from?" Picard sighed. "It's from Saren. We also saw images from Hakon, which confirmed our fears about what happened there. Who knows how many planets and stars have been decimated in between. Geordi stepped closer to the screen. "Can we talk to these people on the shuttlecraft?" Picard shook his head. "We can't contact them at the moment. They're using all their bandwidth to broadcast raw data on every channel. We're on course to intercept them. Data added in approximately 2 hours." Geordi looked at his android friend. "Do we know who they are?" Data shook his head. "No. From the warp signature, it appears to be a Type 8 shuttlecraft. But I am assuming their communications equipment is damaged. They appear to be on course for the inhabited planet, Peleus 5, which could indicate that Peleus 5 is in danger." Picard gazed at the awesome destruction on the view screen. "Let's hope we reach them before it does." Paldor was leaning uncomfortably over Leia Brahms' shoulder and shouting, "We need to get out of its path!" Leia tried to remain calm, but panic had begun to sink in among her ragtag crew. The Tellarite pressed forward, his ample stomach pushing the back of her head. She planted an elbow in his midsection. "Paldor, will you back off?" Maltz jumped to his feet, planted a fist in Paldor's chest, and knocked him backwards. He bumped into Bekra's amputated leg, and the Capellan groaned with pain. Leia tried to ignore them. As long as they kept moving in their current course, she didn't think the wave could catch them. They continued to broadcast raw data on all channels, which had been Maltz's idea. Maltz broke into her thoughts. "Maintain course for Peleus 5? "Yes. And keep the message going out. Do you think it's getting through?" The Klingon scowled. "If it isn't, it's not for lack of trying." The blackness of space lit up as if 1,000 flares had gone off. Leia tried to control their rapid drop in speed, and she finally stabilized the small craft. Maltz reported to her. "That brought us out of warp." Maltz pointed upward as a massive golden warship cruised overhead, blocking out the starscape. "Offhand, I would say it was a warning shot across our bow. I think we had better stop broadcasting and put on local two-way."
"Unknown spacecraft. You have entered Palean space. Peleus 5 is not a member of the Federation. Come to a complete stop now."
Leia quickly obeyed the voice and brought the shuttlecraft to a full stop. She pressed a panel and responded. "Listen, we are running from a terrible energy wave that has already destroyed a half-dozen solar systems. Millions of people on Saren and Hakon are dead, and we're going to be dead unless we both get out of here."
"Turn around and go back the way you came."
Bekra sat forward in his chair with effort.
"Let me talk to him. After all, I am a diplomat."
Maltz laughed.
"As much as I would like to hear that, it won't do any good. The ship is automated."
"Leave now, or we will put a tractor beam on your vessel and escort you from our space."
Leia's heart thumped rapidly in her chest.
"I'm reversing course."
Paldor began shouting at her.
"Are you crazy? That's suicide." "No, suicide would be letting that big drone get a tractor beam on us. We'll stay on impulse."
She glanced at her co-pilot.
"Are they following us?"
Maltz shook his head.
"No."
Leia breathed a sigh of relief, and she peered into the endless distance. Only it didn't appear so endless, with a glowing spiral cloud blocking out the center of the starscape. She turned to Maltz.
"What's that out there? A nebula?"
Maltz stared intently at his instruments, and then back at her.
"I'm afraid not. It's moving rapidly toward us, at warp speed."
She heard Paldor wail in alarm. Then Bekra and Maltz began arguing about who was at fault for them being here. Without giving it a moment's thought, because she didn't have a moment, Leia reversed course again and slammed the shuttlecraft into warp 2. Ahead of them was the huge Pelian warship. Maltz had a wide grin.
"Shields up! Cutlaw! It's a good day to die."
Once again, they spun out of warp. Leia slammed the ship back into warp, this time warp 3. This time, the explosion didn't bring them out of warp. Maltz rubbed his hands together with delight.
"Ha! Bad shots. If I had just one aft torpedo, I would get them off our tail for good."
Leia looked at him.
"We've got warp-equipped sensor probes.
And they don't know they're sensor probes. The Klingon punched his board with enthusiasm.
I launched them all. Well done, Captain. They're coming out of warp. Taking evasive maneuvers. Humans are so devious.
The Klingon's expression drooped like his old mustache.
Now they're powering up phasers. Brace for impact. There go the shields. The next shot, and we're space dust. It's been a pleasure serving with you, Captain.
Leia dragged herself back into her seat.
Do we still have warp?
Malt rose to his knees to look at his console.
Yes.
Leia worked her console.
Full warp.
The scorched shuttlecraft shot into space, just as the fingers of the green shimmering curtain lapped at its stern. Data looked up from his ops station on the bridge of the Enterprise. We are entering Pelion space. Geordi looked up from his console to watch Will Riker pace in front of the view screen. Captain Picard was getting some much-needed rest. Geordi could see impatience etched on Riker's face.
Data, what's on long-range scans?
It would appear that Peleus 5 has undergone the same sort of disaster and transformation that we have seen before. Riker pounded a fist into his palm, and Geordi knew how he felt. Once again, they were too late. An entire civilization, 1 billion souls, had vanished from existence along with every other form of life on the planet. Geordi turned to Data.
How is Paul Revere?
Riker looked puzzled.
Paul Revere? What's he got to do with it?
Data spoke up. That is Geordi's nickname for the mysterious shuttlecraft which has been trying to warn planets in this sector. We are still picking up a faint distress signal from the other side of the Pelion solar system. Riker sighed.
Keep after them.
Geordi broke in.
Setting a course at warp speed is going to be tricky. We've got to avoid the energy wave, which seems to be expanding.
After a few dizzying moments of working his board, Data reported. Course laid in. I estimate we can intercept them in 1 hour. A young Benzite on tactical interrupted. Commander Riker, I've received a message from the Sovereign. Admiral Nechayev wants to know why we keep changing our position. It's making it difficult for them to rendezvous with us.
Tell them that Peleus 5 appears to have been destroyed, and now we're on a rescue mission.
Geordi cut in. I'd like to make a suggestion. We've got a Stellar-class shuttlecraft that can catch them as well as the Enterprise can under these circumstances. Why don't Data and I go chase them, and you stay here and wait for the Admiral? Riker snapped his fingers and pointed to the turbolift. Get going. I'll contact the captain and try to have his permission by the time you get to the shuttle bay. Soon, Geordi and Data were in the shuttle bay and cleared for launch. With Data piloting, the Balboa, sporting twin warp nacelles, streaked into space. Maltz grumbled and cursed in Klingon for several seconds. Then he crawled out from under the instrument panel and looked forlornly at Leia Brahms.
It's not going to work. We're still leaking plasma, and I can't fix the comm system.
Paldor and Bekra crowded around the cockpit of the shuttlecraft, shooting questions at the Klingon. Leia took a deep breath and turned to her shipmates.
It's like this. We already had damage, and we took more damage from the Pelion attack. We're leaking plasma, which means our fuel is going to run out sooner than expected. I'd say we have a half an hour at the most.
Paldor began to pace.
You should have listened to me. I never wanted to go to Peleus 5. And now that thing's just going to eat us alive, like it did all the others.
The Klingon jumped to his feet and lunged for the Tellarite.
No. You're going to be spared that, because I'm going to kill you.
Leia grabbed Maltz by the sash and pulled him gently back to his seat. We're not going to spend our last few minutes bickering. We're going to find a way out. Bekra pointed to the hulking white radiation suit in the corner. We're not all going to die. One of us is going to live. Maltz looked pointedly from Bekra to Paldor.
It's not my suit. Not yours, either.
Leia couldn't help herself. She laughed out loud at the absurdity of this argument. I'm sorry. I lost it there.
One of you can have it. I lived through seeing my husband and colleagues all die. And I'm not going to do that again.
Maltz grinned and slammed his fist into his palm.
What do you say we fight to the death for the honor? That way, even the losers will benefit from a valiant death.
Leia shook her head.
Maltz, there's not enough room in this shuttlecraft for a brawl to the death. It's my invention, and I'll choose. Paldor is the youngest, and he already knows how the suit works.
The Tellarite leaped to his feet and rushed forward.
Oh, Dr. Brahms, thank you. Thank you very much.
He rushed to the back of the cabin and started to strip.
Plasma injectors are depleted and deuterium reserves are low. We will come out of warp in 1 minute.
Grunting and groaning, Paldor tried to shoehorn himself into the hard-shell suit, but he ended up crashing to the deck in a heap. The shuttlecraft dropped out of warp and began cruising at impulse speeds. Leia had a strong urge to call for help, which was futile, because all she had was local short-range communications, hardly better than a comm badge. Still, she opened her comm channel and shouted,
Mayday! Mayday! We're out of fuel! We need help!
Breaking through the crackle of static, a calm voice came back in reply.
Maintain position. Stand by to transport. What?
Leia was the only one paying the slightest attention. Maybe she had imagined that calm, efficient voice answering her hail, but it gave her the spark of hope she needed to keep thinking. She stopped the shuttlecraft and checked her long-range sensors, certain the wave must be right behind them. 500,000 kilometers away, there was nothing but the kind of destruction they had seen before, so it was almost on top of them. Behind her, she heard a howl of victory as Maltz finished fastening the back of the suit, encasing the Tellarite inside. She quickly hit her comm badge.
Paldor, don't turn on the phase shifting yet. Why not?
Leia felt a familiar tingle along her spine. Or maybe it was delirium.
Because we're being rescued.
Leia didn't open her eyes until she felt a deck under her feet. She looked up to see an angel with gleaming white eyes and outstretched hands swooping in to catch her. She gasped with delight as she tumbled into Geordi's arms.
Leia, you're alive.
He guided her gently into a seat and grinned.
We'll talk in a second, when we've got the others.
She anxiously gripped his arm.
Go. Tell your pilot to go, too. There's no time to waste.
Geordi had to use every ounce of discipline and sense of duty in his being to pull himself away from Leia Brahms. Then he heard a clumping sound, and he turned to see a grizzled Klingon step off the transporter.
At last, you showed up. It's about time. I'm Maltz.
Geordi shoved past him to catch an injured Capellan who staggered off the transporter platform. Then an enormous beam encased in white armor arrived on the transporter pad, thrashing around and filling up the rear of the shuttlecraft. Then Data worked his instrument panel, and the shuttlecraft jumped into warp. Geordi knew he should take statements and get particulars from everyone, but only one person on the vessel commanded his attention.
Leia, I just can't believe you're alive.
She sniffed back the tears.
It was horrible. I'd be dead too, except for the radiation suit. I'm sorry, Leia. I know you've been through a lot, but you're all right now.
She shuddered.
No. As long as that thing is out there, we're not all right. Everyone on Earth...
Data spoke up.
Your transmission indicated that one of you claims to have secret information about this anomaly.
The gray-haired Klingon adjusted his sash.
That would be me. It's a weapon, my friend. What ship did you say you were from? The Enterprise. My captain would like to speak with you.
While Data contacted the ship, Geordi leaned forward to listen, and he discovered that Leia was asleep on his shoulder. So he sat still and listened.
This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise.
The old Klingon lifted his stubbled chin.
I am Maltz from the House of Grokan, formerly Klingon consul to Hakon. Maltz, do you know the origin of this destruction? I do, Captain Picard. But are you the right one to tell? Why is it such a secret, Maltz?
The Klingon held up his palms.
You tell me. It's the Federation's secret.
Frustrated, the captain scowled.
Listen, I'm about to meet with an admiral, and if you know anything that might be pertinent, it's your duty to tell me. An admiral, eh? Listen, Picard. If this admiral seems to be hiding something from you, all you have to do is say one word. That word is Genesis. When I get to your ship, I will talk with you and your admiral. In the meantime, you could learn much armed with that word.
Data tapped his panel.
Captain, Dr. Leia Brahms is with us, and she believes Earth is in danger.
Picard nodded grimly.
We are working on those projections. We'll see you at the rendezvous. Enterprise out.
Geordi looked down at Leia, who was sleeping deeply, her head resting on his shoulder. He planned to live through this crisis, but if he had to die right this moment, he'd be a happy man. Captain Picard snapped to attention as the door in his ready room opened, and in walked a slight woman with grayish-blonde hair, a cranberry uniform, and a bar on her collar with 5 pips. Alina Nechayev was not the kind of woman you'd pay much attention to if you passed her on the street, but you couldn't get around her in Starfleet. If you were an enemy of the Federation, she would have your head on a platter, and she was not above fighting dirty. Picard motioned the Admiral to a guest chair while he went behind his desk. Despite his intentions to let Nechayev do most of the talking, he found himself speaking up.
Admiral, we have to muster fleets of ships, evacuate dozens of planets, convene a meeting of the Council, whatever it takes. I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm, Captain, but we don't know the first thing about this phenomenon. There have been theories, but if you asked 10 different scientists, you'd get 10 different answers.
Picard screwed up his courage and said the magic word.
Genesis.
A blush came to Nechayev's face as she considered what to do with that word.
Picard, how do you know about Genesis? A certain old Klingon we rescued. So if Klingons know about it, why don't your veteran captains know?
Nechayev opened a small utility pouch on her belt and pulled out an isolinear chip, which she handed to Picard.
You might as well hear our side of it, too. Read this, and tell me what you think we ought to do.
With that, the Admiral rose from her seat and started for the door. The captain also stood.
Admiral, what makes you so certain that that thing out there is Genesis? You'll read a lot about Dr. Carol Marcus in those documents. She was kidnapped 6 months ago by parties unknown. She's the only one who knows how to build it. After you digest that, you won't be in the dark anymore. I'll be on the Sovereign.
After Admiral Nechayev left the ready room, Picard sat with trepidation at his desk and inserted the isolinear chip into his computer terminal. Then he leaned forward to read the documents given him by Admiral Nechayev. Through a series of reports, he learned how Project Genesis was a scientific research program whose goal was to develop a process whereby uninhabitable planets could be transformed into worlds suitable for sustaining a variety of life forms. The first report was by Dr. Carol Marcus. Development of the planetary delivery system and the high-powered Genesis wave generator was completed at the Regular One Space Laboratory in February 2284. The Starship Reliant was tasked with finding a planet devoid of all life in a suitable orbit for a Class M world on which to test a full-scale Genesis effect. As widely reported, however, this effort was sabotaged by the actions of Khan Noonien Singh, who on March 22, 2285, hijacked the Starship Reliant and stole the Genesis device. Khan detonated the Genesis device on March 26, 2285, in the Mutara Nebula. The detonation of the Genesis device within the Mutara Nebula resulted in the formation of the Genesis planet from the cloud of stellar and planetary debris of which the nebula was composed. The planet cooled and formed a solid crust over its mantle and molten core in less than 26 hours. plant life forms evolved almost immediately and spread quickly across the planet's surface. Erratic weather systems developed, and the planet's crust became increasingly fragile and susceptible to geothermal stressors. A posthumous report filed by Dr. David Marcus revealed that the planet had destabilized because he had used protomatter, an energy-rich but notoriously unstable form of matter, to energize the Genesis wave. Because of the clearly unstable results produced by the Genesis device, the process is unsafe for the creation of habitable worlds, rendering the technology worthless for rapid terraforming. Because of the inherently dangerous and unpredictable nature of protomatter, the Genesis device is not reliable enough to be repurposed for military applications. My formal recommendation to the Federation Council is that all research into Project Genesis continued development be terminated immediately and permanently. The second report was a strategic evaluation that recommended further research. Its finding was that the authors believed Dr. Carol Marcus's suggestion for terminating research was inspired by her grief over the death of her son David on the Genesis planet. The third report discussed the diplomatic ramifications that resulted in the Genesis Non-Proliferation Treaty, whereby all records, materials, schematics, mock-ups, and logs of Project Genesis were ordered destroyed, and active research was terminated. A final report reassessed the current potential of the Genesis project, given recent scientific developments on countering the instability in the use of protomatter. The report suggests continued research because of the possibility of powers hostile to the Federation, notably the Borg, developing a similar device as a weapon. When Picard finished reading and rose from his desk, he knew why Admiral Nechayev seemed so frightened. In brilliant phosphors, his screen said there was no way to stop the Genesis effect, and the basic components were off-the-shelf commodities. Conquer all the planets you want without risking a single casualty, and do it instantly. The Federation's worst nightmare had come true. It was pointless to keep this futile secrecy any longer. Picard to Riker. I'm going to send you some reading material, number 1. Read it and disseminate it to the senior staff. Send it to the Balboa as well. Add to the message that Dr. Carol Marcus was kidnapped 6 months ago. When Data and LaForge return, the senior staff will have a briefing. As soon as I can reach the Admiral, I'm going over to the Sovereign. On board the shuttlecraft Balboa, Data read the missive from the Enterprise in a matter of seconds, then recapped it orally for the others. Data concluded by saying that Dr. Carol Marcus had been kidnapped. Leia looked at Data and Geordi.
Maltz told me that we had invented it, but I didn't believe him. Whoever tried to keep Genesis a secret was on the right track. They just didn't work hard enough.
Geordi shook his head.
What goes around comes around. You think you can bury a thing, forget about it, but you never can.
He was thinking of his feelings for Leia, as much as the promising invention turned deadly.
Leia, I'm truly sorry about Mikkel and your team. I can't imagine...
Vecra spoke up with his usual snideness.
All of this is very touching, but is the Federation going to do anything about this?
Geordi turned to him.
Do you have any ideas?
The Capellan pointed to the radiation suit.
This thing saved her life. And it could save everyone's if we had enough of them.
Leia gave a hollow laugh.
The plans and components are all gone. I'm sure I could duplicate it, but it also depends on Romulan phase-shifting technology. We need to consult directly with the Romulans.
Maltz gave a hearty laugh.
Consul Bekra can talk to the Romulans for us.
Leia stared straight ahead.
That's not the worst of it. Even if you could survive when the Genesis wave swept over your planet, you wouldn't want to live in what was left behind.
Data spoke from the cockpit.
Somebody must plan to live on the altered planets, or else why go to the trouble of terraforming them?
Leia's eyes turned hard as stone.
We've got to find the ones who did this, and kill them. Yes, a blood oath. Kahless, give me the strength to be there with you, Captain, when you rip out their hearts.
Conversation inside the shuttlecraft trailed off after that, as the pall of death haunted their journey back to the Enterprise. On the Sovereign, a young ensign pointed toward double doors at the end of the corridor. Admiral Nechayev is in there. Picard strode into the stellar cartography room, which had been turned into a war room. The positions and courses of hundreds of ships were outlined on a sweeping, three-dimensional holographic star chart. Admiral Nechayev stood in the midst of the three-dimensional rendering, pointing out vessels to an aide, who made notes on a pad. She stepped down from the holograph and shook his hand. "Thank you for coming, Captain Picard. We've got portions of 5 fleets coming and more in reserve. The official story is that we are evacuating planets because of a plague." Picard addressed her directly. "I told my crew the truth, and I let them see the documents. I don't believe we can fight this thing unless we're totally honest about what it is." Nechayev scowled. "How do you propose to fight it?" "I don't know. But even if you had 10 times as many ships on that map, we could only evacuate a small fraction of the people in danger. Captain, until we have a workable plan, evacuation is the only alternative." Picard gaped in disbelief. "You would abandon Earth to this monster? And what about the Romulans? It's going to hit them, too." The breath went out of Nechayev. "If you read the documents, you know we're prohibited by treaty from even discussing Genesis with anyone else. Now I have to cover for you and give the order for everyone in the fleet to be told about Genesis. That's all right. It's better that I'm in the brig than you." Picard hoped she was joking. "Under the circumstances, you couldn't get in trouble for this, could you?" "Captain, I'm in considerable trouble already. I was in charge of the security for Dr. Carol Marcus. My career is basically over after this. Win, lose, or draw. Now, Captain, I would like to see those projections which show that Earth is clearly in danger. We haven't been able to project that far from the data we have." Picard nodded. "For that, we're relying mostly on Dr. Leia Brahms and the survivors from the first planet hit." Nechayev's brow furrowed in thought. "Yes, she's the one who lived through it, in a phase-shifting radiation suit. Has fate given us one tiny piece of good luck in all this destruction? The suit's aboard our shuttlecraft. With her permission, we can take it, dismantle it, and start replicating it. It will be slow going, but yes, do it. Now you've got to leave me, Captain. You've got to officially break a 90-year-old treaty as well as commit treason. I may hold off on talking to the Romulans until we hear the whole story. We supposedly have a Romulan spy coming on board, one of the refugees." Nechayev scowled. "Alliance or not, they still have more spies in our midst than anyone else. I may need help dealing with them." When the shuttlecraft hatch opened, Geordi was a bit surprised to see Commander Riker waiting for them, along with the security team. One by one, they filed off. Riker nodded to each of them. "Welcome aboard the Enterprise. I'm Commander William T. Riker, First Officer." Leia staggered a bit on her feet, and Geordi propped her up. He looked at Riker. "Commander, I think Dr. Brahms needs to get some rest." "Of course. But I have a quick question for you, Dr. Brahms. The captain would like to know whether we can take your radiation suit and try to replicate it." "Yes, Commander. Go ahead. If you think it will do some good." Then Geordi quickly ushered his charge toward the door. As they left the shuttle bay, they ran into Dolores Linton in the corridor. "Geordi, you're back. Is everything okay?" Geordi was flustered to be standing between the two women. "Dolores, what are you doing here?" "Well, after you stood me up for breakfast..." "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot all about our date." He looked at Leia with embarrassment, but she was smiling at his dilemma. "She probably thinks that Dolores is my girlfriend," thought Geordi with alarm. Dolores was cheerful. It's all right. I know you're busy." The shuttle bay door opened, and Riker walked into the corridor. He looked at Geordi with a frown. "You're still here? We've got a staff meeting, so we'll have to find somebody else to take Dr. Brahms to her quarters." Dolores Linton stepped forward. "I'll take her there. I haven't got anything better to do." Riker smiled charmingly at the bubbly young lady. "Thank you very much, miss." Geordi wanted to crawl into a hole. Leia nodded to him. "Go on, Geordi. I'll see you later. Geordi just nodded blankly, reluctant to be parted from Leia, especially when he didn't know what Dolores would say about him. As Riker walked with Geordi to the turbolift, he gave a heave of his broad shoulders. Now that you're back, the Enterprise and the Sovereign are headed in tandem to the next planet in danger. Persephone 5. Geordi shook his head. Damn, I know some people who retired there. Riker nodded. Half of Starfleet is retired there. Now they're all going to have to be evacuated. Being ex-Starfleet, maybe they'll obey orders and will do what they're told. Deanna Troi rushed into the observation lounge and sought an empty seat at the conference table. I'm sorry I'm late. Will Riker smiled warmly at her, and she gave him a fleeting smile. Also in attendance were Data, Geordi LaForge, Dr. Beverly Crusher, and of course, Captain Picard. The captain turned to Deanna. We've just been going over what we know about the Genesis wave, which isn't nearly enough. You've been talking with Consul Maltz. How is he? He seems fine. He's perfectly lucid, and he knows all about Dr. Carol Marcus and the original Genesis project. He kept asking me why we're not doubling back to Saren to get revenge. Picard nodded. Admiral Nechayev has sent a small task force of Defiant-class ships to try to find the source. What else did our guest say? He says we should use the Capellan to contact the Romulans. He insists that Bekra is a spy. The captain scowled. We still don't know what to tell the Romulans. In the meantime, we're replicating as many of Dr. Brahms' radiation suits as we can. Also, LaForge and Brahms will work on a way to expand the phase-shifting technology in her suit. Maybe there's a way it can protect more than one person at a time. Data is going to work on a plan to stop the wave permanently, and Dr. Crusher is studying the biological data to see if we can lessen the effect of the wave or reverse it. That's another use for the radiation suits, to get tricorder readings. We all have plenty of work to do, but don't forget to eat and rest. Dismissed. While the others filed out of the room, Deanna Troi hung back to wait for Riker. Will, you're not planning to hang out on a planet in one of those suits, are you? It will probably be Data, although he shouldn't be down there alone. We'll see. I know you're a thrill-seeker, Will, but you don't need to stand up to this. Riker ended the conversation on an uneasy note. Deanna, we need to stand up to it eventually. Less than 7 hours later, Deanna Troi walked numbly down a corridor crammed with evacuees. They sat propped up against the bulkheads, looking sullen and dispirited. A few of them barely moved their legs, forcing her to step over them. Deanna wanted to run screaming from all of this, but she knew it was her job to listen to these unfortunate souls and let them blow off a little steam. All of a sudden, there was a cacophony of noise as a dozen people bombarded her with questions and complaints. Many of them were hysterical over the fate of loved ones and friends, plus the abandonment of their homes and belongings. Finally, Troi exploded. Step back and maintain order. You will maintain order or I'll have you thrown into the brig. Is that clear? A scowl firmly set on her face. Deanna shoved her way through them. She was on a mission, but it had nothing to do with rescuing people from Persephone 5. The only one she was trying to rescue at the moment was her beloved Will Riker. Moving briskly, she finally reached Transporter Room 1. She strode into the transporter room, half expecting it to be jammed with evacuees. Instead, there were only 3 people there now. Will Riker, Data, and the transporter chief, a dour Andorian named Rofistan. Both Will and Data were dressed in t-shirts and underwear, nothing else. 3 hulking white radiation suits, replicas of Leia Brahms' prototype, stood on the transporter platform. Will looked nervous. Deanna, what are you doing here? Will, I don't want you going down there, trying to live through that thing. Data turned to her as he put on his radiation suit. There is risk involved, but we need tricorder readings and observations taken at close range. Deanna walked over to Will and took his hands. It's you, Imzadi. I lost you before, and I don't want to do it again. You could send somebody else. He pulled her toward him. Deanna, we've tested these suits under a simulation, and they work fine. Okay, Will. Then I'll go with you. You have an extra. Riker shook his head. A spare in case something goes wrong. Deanna hugged him ferociously, not completely understanding why she was so concerned about this mission. Maybe it was the awful nature of this Genesis wave which moved so swiftly and so devastatingly. Riker looked warmly at Deanna.
Time to put me in my shining white armor.
Deanna kissed him one last time and helped to fasten him in. She waited in the transporter room until the gleaming white suits evaporated into swirling columns of charged particles. When Will Riker materialized in the large public square surrounded by glittering blue skyscrapers, a bottle pelted him, bouncing off his radiation suit. He looked at Data, who stood only a few meters away, and the android was in a crouch, fending off two brawlers who had rolled into him. Unruly lines snaked around the numerous sculptures and benches in the square, as people huddled with children and oldsters. 60 meters away, Starfleet officers were trying to load two shuttlecraft. To complicate matters, Starfleet wasn't the only outfit loading vessels in the packed square. A few intrepid entrepreneurs had opened up shop and were taking passengers on their shuttlecraft, if the price was right. One private shuttlecraft, a 6-seater, boarded about a dozen passengers. When they tried to lift off, desperate people in the crowd jumped on the landing rails of the craft and hung on. Its thrusters roared, but the shuttlecraft swooped out of control, carrying too much weight. Riker looked up to see the stricken shuttlecraft veer straight into a skyscraper. A mad rush of people suddenly plowed into Riker and knocked him off his feet. He feared he would be trampled in the stampede.
Computer, activate phase shifting.
Phase shifting on.
At once, the crowd no longer plowed into him, but seemed only to glance off. Data moved swiftly to his side.
Commander, I suggest we seek refuge in one of the buildings and report back to the ship. I also want to perform diagnostics on the suits to see if they have been damaged.
As they reached the sidewalk outside the square, Riker saw swirling transporter beams where beleaguered Starfleet officers had been battling the crowds. At the same time, the rioters swarmed on top of the craft, ripping it apart. Riker followed Data into the lobby of a grand hotel. The scene here was also chaos, with clothes and litter strewn everywhere and people rushing madly through the plush lobby. Riker pointed to a sweeping staircase. He lumbered up the plushly carpeted steps and proceeded into a corridor where they found a door open to an unoccupied room. The room turned out to be a fairly good observation point, with a balcony looking down on the chaotic square. The crowd had turned their wrath on each other. Data spoke to Riker.
Commander, should I report to the captain? Go ahead, Data, and don't spare him the gruesome details.
Captain Picard paced the bridge of the Enterprise, reading the latest projections for the Genesis wave's course. It was strongly suggested that the wave would strike Earth and the heart of the Federation before cutting a wide swath through the neutral zone and the Romulan Star Empire. They only had about 6 days before it entered Earth's solar system. After a consultation with Admiral Nechayev, he had to talk to Consul Bekra immediately, but he couldn't leave the bridge during the evacuation of Persephone 5. It was going badly, except for the 1 million or so lucky ones who had been saved. For every life they saved, 5 would be lost. Picard turned to see Consul Bekra enter. The Capellan was limping slowly on a new artificial limb.
Let's step over to this auxiliary console.
The captain then lowered his voice.
Consul, we have a serious problem. Our latest projections say that the Genesis wave will pass through Romulan space, as well as the heart of the Federation. Will you help us?
Bekra shifted uneasily.
What makes you think I have any influence with the Romulans? Listen, I don't care about anything you've ever done before in your life. If you want a full pardon, Admiral Nechayev will give you one. We need you to contact the Romulans, using any means you desire, and tell them the truth.
Consul Beckra considered Captain Picard for a few moments. Then he finally spoke. I wish to leave this ship as soon as possible. My friend Paldor also wishes to leave. Picard nodded. Use this auxiliary console to contact the Romulans. There will never be any record of our conversation. Beckra looked away from Picard. All right. Leave me here alone. Geordi LaForge paced the gleaming confines of the radiation lab on Deck 17. Leia Brahms was late for their first shift together, which made him pace all the faster. In many respects, he felt guilty about even making her work on this assignment, but her radiation suit was the only object to withstand the Genesis wave so far. He had one of the replicated suits in the lab, and he had started to study it while he waited. What they needed were a couple of Romulan engineers who knew this phase shifting like he and Leia knew warp engines. Geordi turned eagerly to see his fellow engineer walk in. Leia was dressed in a gray engineer's jumpsuit. He gave her a warm smile. The smile faded almost immediately from his face when he saw another figure stride through the door behind her. It was the old Klingon, Maltz, and he cast a fishy eye in Geordi's direction. Leia patted Geordi on the shoulder. It's all right. I told Maltz he could come along to help us. He's seen it too. I've got to do something. We can't run from this enemy. We've got to go down fighting it. Geordi grimaced. Yes, but our particular mission is to find a way to let more people survive the wave. Leia shook her head grimly. I'll help you do it, but you won't want to live on one of these planets after you survive. Well, that's just it, Leia. Now we've got some really good long-range scanner data from the affected planets. They may not be pleasant, but they are livable. The new Genesis planets look like they're going to stabilize quite nicely. Leia turned away, and Geordi felt a pang of guilt about having been so blunt. Of course, one of those planets was Saren, where her husband and friends had been absorbed into the new ecosystem. I'm sorry, Leia. I didn't mean to be so blunt. We haven't got enough ships to evacuate everyone. This current mission is a mess. We need shelters that work, and we need them right now. Leia turned around and gazed at him. Her brown eyes were moist from tears. All right, I'll help you. Start making a shopping list. We need those big interphase generators the Romulans have. Without them, it won't work. I'll also need data on how deep into the crust of the planet the Genesis wave goes. Maybe all we need to do is dig holes deep enough to protect the inhabitants. I know a certain geologist who's not doing much, and she'd be willing to help us. And Geordi. I really like Dolores. I approve. Geordi wanted to correct her impression of him and the visiting geologist, but he was done looking as if he still had a thing for Leia, even if he did. The Klingon proceeded to stretch out on the bare deck. You two do your research and save your lives, and I'll save my strength to take lives. We will go back and kill the ones who are doing this, right, Captain? Leia winked at Geordi as if she were humoring the old warrior, but there was a spark of excitement in her eyes. I'll be there, Maltz. To at least one person in the universe, I'm a captain. Will Riker sat on the edge of his bed in a strange hotel room, wrapped in a blanket, while Data checked his suit's diagnostics. I don't much like waiting for the end of the world. Data nodded. Yes, Commander. It is difficult to watch this world die, especially with so little dignity. The android unplugged his tricorder from a jack in the back of Riker's radiation suit, apparently finished with his diagnostic routines. Both suits are still functioning within normal parameters. We have approximately 22 minutes, and the evacuation will be over. Riker stood and walked toward the balcony door, careful not to step into view. Thousands of residents were standing around, lifting their arms to the heavens, beseeching the fickle gods of far-off transporters to save them. When it hits, Data, I don't want to be inside this skyscraper. I want to be in the square. The wind shifted, and a whiff of something acrid hit Riker's nostrils. The sprinkler system in the ceiling of the hotel room came on, blasting everything with a dense spray of water and chemicals. Smoke was seeping through the closed door from the hallway. Riker managed to grab one of the suits and haul it out on the balcony. From there, he could see that the hotel was on fire several stories overhead. Riker glanced into his suit to see that it had gotten wet inside. It was about 12 meters straight down to the sidewalk, and that looked like the way they would have to leave. Data joined him on the balcony, dragging his armor. "Commander, I will jump down and you can throw me the equipment." Data bounded over the wrought iron railing as easily as if he were stepping over a curb. The room door flew open. A fireball roared from the hallway through the room, hurling Riker and the radiation suits over the railing. Deanna Troi stopped in the middle of her sentence. She couldn't remember what she had been saying to the group of evacuees gathered in her office. She had an overwhelming premonition, a certainty that something had happened to Will. She looked at the chronometer over her door and noted that they were only about 15 minutes away from the expected arrival of the wave. Patients were bombarding her with questions, but she shoved her way through them. Finally, she broke out of her office into the corridor. She was slowed down by the milling crowds who glared suspiciously at her. She tapped her comm badge. "Troi to Riker."
Commander Riker is not responding.
Deanna lifted her elbows and jabbed her way through the crowd. "Out of my way! Emergency!" Moving steadily down the jammed corridor, Deanna finally reached the crowded transporter room. The tall Andorian transporter chief was busy working his instruments, bringing groups of 8 haggard evacuees in at once. Security moved them off the platform just as another wave took their place. "Chief Rofiston, have you heard from the away team, Riker and Data?" "No, I'm due to pick them up exclusively in another 2 minutes. I think they're in trouble. They haven't answered my hails." The Andorian kept working the transporter controls. "Maybe they're out of their suits for some reason. Their only communication systems are inside the suits." Deanna looked around the crowded room and she finally found what she was looking for. Discarded in the corner was the 3rd radiation suit, the spare one. When the transporter chief looked up again, she approached him. "Do you have 2 spare comm badges?" From a drawer, he fished out 2 standard comm badges and handed them to her. "Chief, I'm going to put on the extra radiation suit and go down to the surface." His antenna twitched for a moment. "Are you sure that's advisable?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. Set me down exactly where you set Riker and Data down. But do what you can to get all 3 of us." Deanna went over to one of the guards near the transporter room door and told him to give her his phaser rifle. She turned back to the chief. "I think I'll take this with me, and my comm badge." The chief raised a white eyebrow. "The comm badge won't do you any good inside that suit, but I'll route your communications through. Are you staying to take the readings?" Deanna swallowed dryly. "Let's say, for the sake of argument, I am." Rofiston looked at her. "I have to turn off the phase shifting a split second before I transport you. I'll control that from here, but I didn't want you to be surprised. The suit checks out, you're good to go." When she had suited up, she stepped onto the transporter platform with the phaser rifle. "Energize." A moment later, Deanna Troi materialized in the middle of a huge public square filled with people, trash, and the wreckage of a couple of shuttlecraft. She instantly whirled in every direction looking for Will and Data, but she couldn't see them in the mass of people rushing to and fro. "Computer, activate comlink. Troi to Riker. Troi to Data." Her hails were met by stony silence. Then her attention was distracted by columns of dark smoke spewing from one of the glittering skyscrapers bordering the square. "I need to find some kind of high ground," thought Deanna, "so I can see over all these people." As she lumbered along, wielding her phaser rifle, she got a few blank stares, but most of the inhabitants were lost in their own worlds. She jumped when she heard a voice in her headgear. "Chief Rofiston to Troi. I just wanted to let you know that we've stopped evacuations and we're on yellow alert. The captain has given word that we should be ready to pull out any second. After it hits the planet, we only have 10 seconds before it reaches the ship. I'm under orders to get you after 6 seconds, even if we can't find the other team." She knew it would do no good to argue with him. He had his orders. How could she find them in all this chaos? She suddenly pointed the phaser rifle toward the sky. She fired one brilliant streak after another into the sky. It seemed like forever that she wandered in the square shooting her phaser, but it was only a couple of minutes. Finally, a figure came bounding toward her across the park, leaping over people's heads. It was Data. He wasn't wearing his radiation suit. Counselor Troy, I'm surprised but gratified to see you.
Data, where is Commander Riker?
Data pointed to the black smoke spewing from an elegant skyscraper. He was injured in that fire. He is conscious now, but unable to walk. Our radiation suits were also damaged, and we were unable to contact the ship. A voice burst into her ears over the comlink in her headgear.
Picard to Troy. The wave is moving faster than we anticipated. You have less than 2 minutes. We can't seem to contact Riker and Data.
Deanna took a deep breath and looked around the dying city.
Captain, I'm staying on the surface to take readings, but I've got comm badges for Riker and Data. Beam them up now, but don't forget me. We won't, Counselor. Good luck. Picard out.
She turned to Data and handed him the 2 extra comm badges.
Data, get Will to safety. But how do I work this suit?
Say, computer phase shifting on. Tricorder operations are automatic. With that, the android turned and bounded off, leaping 20 meters at a time, sailing over the desultory crowd.
Computer, phase shifting on.
All systems functional. Interphase mode activated. For a betazoid, your vital signs are quite elevated, indicating severe stress or illness.
Never mind about me, I'm okay.
Deanna had more pressing concerns. Every passing second, more people were staring at her in curiosity and anger, and they were coming closer. She lifted her phaser rifle and leveled it at the crowd. One older man, who might have looked distinguished if his shirt weren't torn and his nose weren't bloody, came toward her. "Hey, you got any more of those suits?" She spoke, and her amplified voice boomed from the suit.
Are any of you former Starfleet?
Hands shot up all around her, and there was a glimmer of hope in their vacant eyes.
I have to take tricorder readings. I need people to do a little crowd control for me, to keep the curious away.
But what about saving us? Aren't there any more rescues?
Starfleet officers, do you remember the oath you took to help others? To do as you were ordered? Your actions would help to save others in the path of this disaster.
She had shamed them, or at least stunned them, into a few moments of silence and retrospection. The sky over the town square began to darken, shifting from a pale blue to a putrid green. The people began to run, colliding into each other. Complete strangers gripped each other in terrified embrace. She turned to see mirrored skyscrapers, quivering like an optical illusion. A searing green curtain enveloped the buildings. The mirrored surfaces throbbed, then exploded. The pavement heaved under her feet and crumbled to dust. Before her horrified eyes, people's bodies broke down into basic components: blood, organs, bones. She watched living beings seep into the ground, joining a seething miasma of twitching new life.
Phase shifting off.
As her feet began to smolder and sink in the mire, Deanna screamed. She staggered off the Enterprise transporter platform. Effortlessly, Data pulled her out of the burning suit and deposited her in another pair of strong arms. Will's. "It's all right, Deanna. You're safe." Chief Rofiston announced from the operator's console. "We're in warp drive. The tricorder data appears complete. Mission accomplished. Congratulations, Commander Troy." She nodded warily, and Will gave her an extra hug and a proud smile. On the edge of the neutral zone, 4 mighty Romulan warbirds rested, motionless in space. In his quarters, Commander Jagron of the warbird Darvok stood perfectly still while his valet straightened his regal dress uniform. The praetor himself was due to meet with them, a great honor. Jagron had only had his command since the Dominion War, when his commander had fallen in battle. But he had ambitions beyond the command of a single vessel. He strode from his quarters down the hallway to the transporter room, where he was met by his top aides, Centurion Gravenak and Intelligence Officer Petroliv. The tall and stately Petroliv was also his lover, but they had taken considerable pains to hide that fact from the rest of the crew. Jagron asked them,
"Are we still in the dark about the reason for this gathering?"
Petroliv answered, "Not entirely. We are sure it has something to do with the massive fleet movements we've been observing in the Federation." When they reached the transporter platform, a very nervous transporter operator cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Commander Jagron, but the protocols call for every commander to bring one aide, no more. Centurion Gravenak folded his hands in front of him, as if expecting the intelligence officer to step down. Commander Jagron gazed from the stuffy first officer to his beautiful intelligence officer. "Gravenak, return to the bridge." They were met on the Terex by Commander Tomalak, an old veteran.
"Welcome aboard, my young colleague. You're the last one. Even the Praetor was here before you."
Jagron shrugged, not explaining that he had planned it that way. Tomalak led the way out the door.
"The Praetor and the Proconsul. This is undoubtedly the most important meeting you've ever attended."
In the briefing room were two more commanders, plus their aides. The Praetor and the Proconsul were not in evidence. Tomalak nodded to them all. "Our most distinguished guests will be joining us soon. They wanted us to watch some video logs first. Computer, begin playback." In one harrowing scene after another, they watched as an eerie wall of flame destroyed planets, moons, stars, nebulas, cities, mountains, and skies. Everything which stood in its way. When the horrendous images finally ended, a Romulan scientist came on the screen to explain what they had just witnessed. A secret Federation weapon which had been outlawed by every power in the Alpha Quadrant 90 years ago had been unleashed in a new attack. This mass destruction was happening in the Federation right now. The only thing which had stood up to it so far was phase-shifting technology copied from the Romulan star Empire. A voice came from behind them. It was Proconsul Woderbach, head of the Senate. "If the Federation cannot contain this Genesis wave, it will cross the neutral zone and strike deep into our territory, endangering dozens of inhabited worlds." He went on to explain about Dr. Carol Marcus and her abduction. One commander sneered in disbelief.
"Maybe it's some kind of trick to make us move our fleets or abandon our worlds."
The Proconsul shook his head. "It has been verified by one of our operatives in the area." Commander Tomalak looked ashen. "What are we supposed to do?" "You will receive your orders from the highest source. Please rise for the Praetor." A bent, gray-haired man entered. He wore the regal charcoal and lavender robes of state, bedecked in elaborate insignias, medals, and ribbons.
"Sit down, commanders. If it were only the Federation in danger, we would do nothing to help these pathetic fools. However, this may be the gravest threat our Empire has ever faced. I am ordering you to go to the coordinates which are being sent to your bridges as we speak. Proceed at maximum warp. You will receive free passage through the Federation. If hailed, just use the code word Genesis. Upon reaching the Starfleet vessels Enterprise and Sovereign, you are to hand over your interface generators to their scientists. In short, you are to assist Starfleet in any way they see fit to use you. Go with the speed of the Bloodhawk. You are dismissed."
They stood again as the Praetor shuffled out of the room. Jagron didn't trust himself to say anything profound, so he kept his mouth shut. From the corner of his eye, he saw the Proconsul motioning to him. "Stay a moment, Commander Jagron." It wasn't until the door shut that Proconsul Woderbach stepped closer to him. "Commander Jagron, there's something that needs to be done, and I can't ask one of the others to do this. In fact, I can't ask you to do it." Jagron nodded. "You want me to steal this Genesis device?" The Proconsul smiled. "Hypothetically, if someone were to come into possession of such a device, he would have to take full responsibility if caught. But if this person were successful in smuggling the device back to me, well, the stars are the limit for a young man with such initiative." Jagron tried not to smile. but the corners of his mouth tilted slightly upward. He was already one of the youngest commanders. Maybe he could be one of the youngest senators. Captain Picard and Admiral Nechayev stood on the observation deck of Starbase 393, watching a stream of refugees disembark from the Enterprise and file down the extendable docking port into the space station. Picard had never seen the Admiral so despondent. "Admiral, we can be justly proud of all the lives we've saved." Nechayev rested her elbows on the railing and looked down at the sea of people below them. "We lost more people in 3 minutes than we lost during the entire Dominion War. Don't be too hard on yourself, Admiral. We did all we could do. Once we get the interphase generators from the Romulans, Roms and LaForge think we can arrange shelters big enough to protect large groups of people and animals." The Admiral lifted her chin. "The task force has already skirted around Saren. Soon we'll have another front. Maybe they can find the source of the wave and shut it down." Picard nodded, unable to add anything to that fervent hope. Captain Lanwaring of the Defiant-class starship Neptune peered curiously at the dark boulders, debris, and dust cluttering his view screen. According to the charts, this was the Boneyard, a vast asteroid field, the remains of some cataclysm when the universe was new. There were trillions of rocks in there, ranging in size from Earth's moon to the tiniest dust particle. According to the latest projections, this was Ground Zero, where the Genesis wave began. Of course, here, the wave was hardly bigger than a laser point and undetectable by their sensors. The 5 Defiant-class vessels had small crews, but the speed and firepower of much larger ships. The Neptune observed the Boneyard from a cautious distance of 200,000 kilometers. Heron, a young blonde woman who was his ops officer, spoke up. "Probe 3 reporting back. No life forms reported, although there are amino acids, proteins, and other building blocks." The science officer Mitchell spoke up. "That kind of residue is commonly associated with the wave." Lanwaring nodded. "It's a good haystack in which to hide a needle, but sometimes you have to flush the game. You know, fire a couple of wild shots and see if you can roust anything from the brush. Tactical, open up a secure channel to the task force." Lanwaring stepped behind the tactical console. "To all ships in Task Force Javelin, I've decided to fire a brace of torpedoes into the Boneyard to see if we can stir anything up. On my mark, fire torpedoes in firing pattern Delta 9. The captain lifted his hand and brought it down decisively. "Fire!" 2 streaks of light shot outward from the ship, headed toward the asteroids. 10 violent eruptions tore through the asteroid field. Rock and debris were blasted outward and inward, turning the targeted area into a ricocheting demolition derby. A minute later, it was relatively peaceful again. The captain leaned over Ops. "Anything on sensors?" Heron reported. "Sir, I'm detecting vegetable matter." Science Officer Mitchell peered at his own readouts. "It looks old. Probably lichens on the rocks, still there from eons ago when this field was a living planet." Heron suddenly sat up. "There's something metallic out there, sir. It appears to be spherical in shape. I can put it on visual." When the image cleared, Lanwaring gasped with surprise. It looked like a charred, dented escape pod, revolving slowly as it sped through space. "What's the size of that thing?" Mitchell answered. "Well, it's approximately 4 meters in diameter. There are no life signs on board, and it doesn't seem to be producing any power. But I am picking up a bit more of that vegetable matter. Maybe it's old foodstuffs." Lanwaring turned to the con. "Take us within 100 kilometers of the sphere and get a tractor beam on it. Just to stop it. Don't bring it on board. Keep shields up as much as you can. Tactical. What are the other ships reporting?" "Same thing we're seeing, sir." Lanwaring wanted to believe that this find was significant, but there were plenty of logical explanations why an escape pod had become lodged inside an asteroid field. Tell the other ships to converge on our position. Shields up. Mitchell, I want you to do an EVA inspection on that object. Take the shuttle pod. Heron will pilot for you. The shuttle pod was the smallest self-propelled vessel to carry Starfleet markings. Nevertheless, Eileen Heron liked piloting the little sprite, and she was the best on the ship. Science Officer Peter Mitchell sat down beside her, wearing a thin, low-pressure environmental suit, and he gave her a pout that was part disdain and part fear.
I shouldn't have to do this. Don't we have security officers or something?
Eileen smiled.
You know, science officer isn't a desk job out here. You have to prove your mettle.
Mitchell hefted an armful of tricorders, tools, drills, and sample bags.
Okay, let's do it. Or at least I get to ride in Eileen's buggy.
Heron grinned.
Oh, you heard they call it that.
The shuttle pod shot out of a small opening in the underbelly of the Neptune. With a few quick, sure maneuvers, Heron homed in on the aged sphere floating in space. She told Mitchell,
just make a quick appraisal of it. Take some readings, a core sample, a few souvenirs. Just do your job. I don't think anyone will be shocked if it doesn't have anything to do with why we're out here. Ready?
He nodded, and she cracked the hatch open. Mitchell fumbled anxiously in the sudden weightlessness. Finally, he managed to extricate himself from the chair and float out the open hatch. He quickly attached his tether. Gazing out her viewport, Heron noticed that Mitchell had reached the mysterious sphere and was taking tricorder readings. Then he astounded her by pulling or pushing something that opened a hatch. Mitchell stuck his hand into it. Heron got on the comlink.
Mitchell, what are you doing? I've got to go inside.
Without any further lead, the science officer popped into the sphere and was gone. Soon there was movement around the pod, and a helmet emerged, followed by the rest of the environmental suit.
Heron to Mitchell. I'm going to bring you in, all right?
The hooded figure waved to her and hefted what looked like a bag of old leaves. A few seconds later, she sprung the hatch, and the suited figure climbed back into the shuttle pod. His movements stiff and jerky, Mitchell deposited his equipment and samples behind the seats, and he settled into his chair. Finally, he removed his helmet and smiled at her. Heron asked him,
Is there anything we should report back to the ship before we leave?
Mitchell stared straight ahead.
No, it's dead. I don't think this escape pod was ever manned. Maybe it was released by mistake.
Heron glanced behind the seat. The dried plant life at close range was dirty and gray, like old clumps of Spanish moss or mistletoe.
What's that stuff in the bag? Are you sure we should bring it back to the ship?
Mitchell gazed meaningfully at her.
It's inert, and it's probably the only thing that will tell us the age of this craft. It must have been a survival pod of some sort, because they had a kind of hydroponic growing system. The plant's no more harmless than your grandmother's pressed flower collection.
She blinked at him, amazed.
How did you know about my grandmother's pressed flower collection?
He shrugged.
Every grandmother has a pressed flower collection. So did mine.
He boldly touched her thigh.
It's just one more thing we have in common.
Heron knew she should slap him, but his aggressive move had caught her by surprise, and in an oddly receptive mood. In fact, her legs seemed to burn where his mere fingers touched it.
Eileen, when we return, tell the captain that neither one of us feels well. We're both going to need to go lie down in our quarters. Of course, you will come with me.
In a daze, she punched her comm panel.
Shuttle pod to Neptune. There's nothing major to report. We're on our way back. Shuttle pod out.
As she grabbed his hand and held it to her cheek, the science officer gave her a compassionate smile.
Eileen, you are so sad and lonely, even though you put up that brave front. You'll never be lonely again.
Maltz snored peacefully in a corner of the radiation laboratory, snuffling and grunting to himself, while Geordi LaForge and Leia Brahms pored over equations and charts on their situation monitors. Since the Romulans were already on their way with the interphase generators, it was definite that phase shifting would get the first trial under fire. As Leia had surmised, the Genesis effect only extended a certain distance into the crust. Unfortunately, the wave triggered earthquakes and volcanic eruptions as a side effect. Even in Leia's radiation suit, Geordi wouldn't care to be caught in a starship when that wave hit it. Oddly enough, despite the horrendous upheaval, a suitable planet was the safest place to be. Leia shook her head sadly. If we think we're going to save anybody's home with these interphase generators, we're sadly mistaken. We're still going to have to evacuate these people. Then Leia closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead. I'm sorry, Geordi. I don't know why I'm so negative. Well, I do know why, but I'm trying hard not to deal with it. Geordi shook his head in exasperation. I don't know what to tell you, Leia. The loss of a spouse, that's something I've never gone through. It must be awful. Geordi, I didn't love him anymore. I mean, he was a huge part of my life, but he felt more like a partner than a husband. And I think he was seeing somebody else. I just didn't care hard enough. Trembling, Geordi extended his hand and was about to reach for hers when the door opened. The old Klingon was instantly on his feet.
Who goes there? Who's that?
It was Dolores Linton, dressed in work overalls. Hi, Leia. You asked me to come at noon? Leia dabbed a sleeve at her eyes. Dolores, thanks for coming. She motioned Dolores over to the situation monitor and tapped her finger on the screen. We've got a lot of geology data, but we're not exactly sure what we're looking at. In open air, the interphase generator should work against the wave, and I'm not sure how far either one of them extends into the ground. Dolores' eyes grew wide. Interphase generators? Geordi jumped to his feet. We really should spend some time bringing Dolores up to speed on the plan. Maltz scoffed. What's to explain? Throw down some sneaky Romulan device and hope for the best. This is just the kind of reaction you would expect to get from the Federation. Geordi grew angrily defensive. We've also sent a task force to Saren. Dolores Linton glanced around at the desultory expressions. When was the last time any of you were out of this room? It's lunchtime. I say we talk over food. Immediately, Maltz headed for the door. Good idea. I like you, Mission Specialist Linton. She stepped back to allow the lanky Klingon to exit first, and he seized the honor. A pad in his hand, Captain Picard paced across his ready room, reading the reports from another world that had fallen, Serona 8. It could have been much worse. Although the Klingon fleet showed up with less than 8 hours to spare, they had very efficiently saved 4 million lives, killing a few dozen rioters in the process. Unlike Starfleet's rescue attempts, they reported no sites abandoned or overrun. He glanced at the pad and saw that there was a coded message from Admiral Nechayev. It read simply, "We stand at Myrmidon. The Romulans will meet us there at 1500 hours." Picard nodded to himself, half expecting this news. Picard to Mott. Can you come up to my ready room for a moment? Mott, his favorite barber, was the unofficial head of the Bolian contingent on the ship. Myrmidon was a good choice. Although not the Bolians' ancestral homeworld, it was declared their spiritual home 500 years ago, after an ancient artifact, the crown of the First Mother, was discovered there. Although the artifact was never proven definitely to be related to the Bolians, they were very happy to accept Myrmidon as their main religious shrine. Mott bustled in, and he was his usual jovial self, in the face of what must be considerable personal anguish. The captain put his hand on the blue-skinned barber's shoulder. You haven't asked for any favors, Mr. Mott, but I know you must be thinking about Myrmidon. You have family there, don't you? The barber gulped. Yes. My parents, in fact. Almost all of us on board have relatives there. We have big families. Picard nodded sympathetically. Keep this under your hat, Mr. Mott. But Myrmidon is where we are making a stand.
We're going to try the phase-shifting plan there.
The barber put his hands together in applause.
Oh, thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank Admiral Nechayev. But we don't want to raise anyone's hopes. We might not be able to pull it off.
Mott nodded thoughtfully and cast his eyes downward.
Thank you, Captain, for telling me. However, I should warn you, my people believe strongly in assisted suicide. Any act that relieves suffering is acceptable, even if that act has the effect of causing death.
Picard nodded somberly. That was all they needed. Mass suicides, as they were desperately trying to save lives.
Understood, Mr. Mott. So I may need your help to convince your people that the Genesis wave is a swift way to die, with very little suffering. So even if things go wrong...
Mott sucked in his stomach and stuck out his chest.
Captain, I won't let you down. Bridge to LaForge. We've just entered orbit around Myrmidon. The Romulans and Klingons are already here. I'd like to have yourself, Dr. Brahms, and Consul Maltz as part of the greeting committee to answer questions. I'll meet you in Transporter Room 1 in 5 minutes. Picard out.
Geordi looked sheepishly at Dolores Linton, who had taken over the situation monitor. The geologist shrugged, as if to say she would keep on working. Geordi turned to see Maltz grinning as he ran a sharpening stone over the long center blade of his 3-bladed knife.
Now, this gets interesting.
Leia Brahms led the way out the door.
Let's get it over with.
Captain Picard led his considerable entourage into the saucer lounge on the Sovereign. There was a large contingent of Klingons, and at least as many Romulans stood in haughty isolation. The only one who even seemed remotely glad to be here was the old Klingon, Maltz. He strode off, waving his hands as if he were greeting old friends, although his fellow Klingons regarded him warily.
Captain Picard.
The captain whirled around. It was Commander Tomalak.
What is going on here, Picard? Can't you people be trusted with your own toys?
The captain scowled.
Believe me, I never heard of Project Genesis until just before you did. Our intentions were good, but we failed to think of the consequences.
The old Romulan nodded sagely.
Now that sounds like the Federation we know and love. I don't think our alliance is going to last very long if this disaster destroys several of our worlds.
Picard shook his head.
It's not going to get that far. When do you turn over your interface generators to us? Your efficient Admiral Nechayev has us dismantling them right now.
Picard saw several Starfleet officers hurry toward the door. He turned to see Admiral Nechayev stride into the sumptuous lounge.
Honored guests, generals, captains, commanders, thank you for attending this gathering. In 24 hours, the beautiful planet floating beneath us will be transformed forever. But it will still be here, and so will we. This time, we will not retreat.
The Admiral motioned to the Romulans.
If any of you have any questions about the Genesis wave, please don't hesitate to ask myself, my staff, or our experts, Dr. Leia Brahms and Commander Geordi LaForge.
A stocky Klingon general strode forward.
I have a question. Why don't you go get the beasts who are doing this to you?
Admiral Nechayev responded firmly.
General Greycore, we've dispatched a task force of 5 Defiant-class starships to locate the source, but so far they've been unsuccessful. If we continue to be unsuccessful, I will be happy to give you that assignment.
Nechayev grabbed a filled glass from an aide and held it aloft.
We salute you, our allies.
You're here. Bravo!
Nechayev motioned to Picard and led him along the observation window until they were far away from anyone else's hearing. Picard could guess what it was.
Something wrong with the task force?
The Admiral nodded glumly.
We've lost contact. They were investigating a large asteroid field called the Boneyard, where we think the wave might originate. But all of our forces are committed here. If we don't hear soon, I'm going to give the Klingons this information.
Maybe they can spare a ship or two. Her stern expression softened into thoughtfulness as she gazed out the window at the endangered planet. Captain, I'm going to stay on Myrmidon with the populace during the transformation. A show of confidence. If I can live through it, I'll be able to convince others to live through it. Although I'm going to make a call for Starfleet volunteers to stand with me, I really don't want a horde of people. And you have to make sure the Enterprise survives. Don't volunteer when I make my call. That's all, Captain. Thank you, Admiral. The captain stepped away from the observation lounge window to allow others access to Admiral Nechayev. Despite the massing of ships and the arrival of allies, he was worried. The disappearance of the task force showed that their mysterious enemy was more formidable than they imagined. Admiral Nechayev appeared energized by her plan to risk her life, but Picard could see disaster in the making. If admirals and dignitaries died horrible deaths, not to mention 50 million Bolians, then Picard would be left to oversee a chaotic stampede stretching halfway across the quadrant, plus the destruction of more planets and billions of people, including Earth. And the ultimate enemy would remain anonymous and untouched. We have to succeed on Myrmidon, Picard told himself in no uncertain terms. On the other side of the saucer lounge, the Klingons bombarded Maltz with questions, and Maltz began to sweep his hands through the air and gruffly relate his tale. First came his heroic escape from Hakon, complete with jailbreak, Romulan spy, and the Genesis wave bearing down on them. He praised the young human who had saved him to spread the alarm, Dr. Leia Brahms. General Greycorse sneered.
Saved by a human. You still have much to answer for, Maltz. You and that idiot Krug let the Genesis device escape our grasp when you had the chance to seize it. You haven't tried hard enough to get the Sto-vo-kor. That insult, General, is 90 years old.
Maltz pounded his chest.
I know I'm going to Sto-vo-kor because I have sworn a blood oath against this cowardly weapon and the demons who unleashed it. This beast has come after me twice, wrecking my career each time, and this time I intend to finish it.
General Greycorse grinned and pounded the old warrior's shoulders with his beefy fists.
I misjudged you, Maltz. Nothing will stand in the way of your blood oath. What will you require? A ship?
Greycorse nodded.
Ships are scarce at the moment, but I'll do what I can.
Maltz nodded, tears filling his rheumy eyes. It had been a long time since a gathering of his fellows had praised the old Klingon. Will Riker gazed with satisfaction at the platform in Transporter Room 2. Every spot on the pad was occupied, not by a person, but by a complex machine. Everything going as planned, Chief? The Andorian Transporter Chief nodded. Yes, sir. This is the last batch consigned to the planetary factories. All the rest are headed to the sanctuaries of the First Mother, where the Bolians are gathering. Great, Chief. Let me know when you're done with the generators. Keep up the good work. At the same time, on the planet's surface, Geordi, Leia Brahms, and Dolores Linton, along with the Romulans, had just completed a successful test of the phase-shifting generators. When Admiral Nechayev announced that she was staying on the planet to ride out the Genesis wave, Geordi and Dolores volunteered to remain with her, leaving Leia aghast. As she beamed up to the Sovereign, Leia gave Geordi a final look, and it was hard to tell whether she was angry or mournful over what she considered was his rash decision. On the bridge of the Enterprise, the mood was somber as they waited for sensors to confirm the arrival of the Genesis wave. Data turned to the captain from his usual post at the ops console. That is odd. A Starfleet vessel has just come out of warp 20,000 kilometers from here. It is the Neptune, part of Task Force Javelin, which has been reported missing. They do not answer our hails. Sensors show no life signs on board. Picard contacted Admiral Nechayev, who told him to investigate. And she added, Commander LaForge and Dolores Linton have volunteered to remain on the planet with me. I'm sorry if the request wasn't put through officially. Give me a report on the Neptune as soon as you can. Nechayev out. Riker stomped across the bridge. What was Geordi thinking? But he realized there was nothing anybody could do. Picard looked at him, getting back to business. Number 1, you and Data are on the away team. You'd better take Dr. Crusher, too. Tell her it's likely the crew is dead, but she should be prepared for casualties. At the turbolift door, Riker stopped and turned around. Captain, if the Neptune is ship-shape, Dr. Crusher would be a good choice to command her. The captain scratched his chin thoughtfully. I'll consider it. Let's find out what happened to the ship first. The away team found the bridge of the Neptune deserted, as expected. Beverly Crusher looked around, thinking that it reminded her of a smaller version of the bridge on the old Enterprise D. While Data consulted his tricorder, Riker strode to the ops console and checked the readouts. I want to see if there's any record of someone setting a warp course and then beaming off just before it engaged. Riker pressed the membrane keypad several times and shook his head. No. All the logs for the last 2 days have been wiped. Data peered intently at his tricorder. There are still no signs of life, but there is inert organic matter scattered throughout the ship. Perhaps foodstuffs. I suggest we split up. Riker turned to Crusher. Doctor, why don't you take the crew quarters? Let me know if you see anything unusual. A moment later, Beverly Crusher was alone in a nondescript corridor with doors lining only one side. Something smelled funny, like spoiled food. Consulting her tricorder, Crusher homed in on the strange smell and found a mound of leaves rotting in an open doorway. There was nothing unusual in the simple stateroom. She walked over to a desk and looked at the collection of framed pictures depicting 2 human children and 2 elder adults. Where did everyone go? This is all wrong. Hearing something, she whirled around to see a shadow pass the open doorway. She dashed out of the room into the corridor, but there was no one there. She went swiftly from one door to another, opening each and peering inside the simple quarters. She heard the sound again and whirled around, her senses acutely on edge as she listened to the silence of the ghost ship. Mother? Her eyes lit on the door marked sickbay. Her hand hovered over her comm badge, ready to call Riker, but what would she tell him? That she was spooked and kept hearing voices? With determination, she slapped the panel on the bulkhead and opened the door to sickbay. Hi, Mom. Standing 4 meters away was her son, Wesley Crusher. She felt lightheaded from the shock of seeing him and began to stumble. Wesley! I can't believe it's you! He rushed to catch her. He had a broad smile on his face. I've come a long way to help out, but this has to be our secret for a little while. But Wesley, why? Like I said, Mom, I came a long way, and I'm not supposed to be here. In the meantime, I can help you, and you will need it. Crusher nodded, unable to think clearly. After years of being separated from her only child, she told herself that he was not a mere human anymore, but that he had godlike powers. But Wesley, what happened to the crew? He wrapped her in his arms and gently stroked her hair, and all of her questions and concerns evaporated. Her comm badge beeped, and it was like a far-off alarm waking her from a dream. Crusher here. It was Riker. Doctor, we haven't found anything of interest, except for a bit of trash on the floor. How about you? Beaming with happiness, she reported. I don't see anything wrong with this craft. That's good, Doctor, because data reports that the ship is fully functional. We'll have to fly it out. You may end up in the captain's chair before the end of the day. Crusher was smiling. Tell Captain Picard that I'd be glad to be acting captain of the Neptune. Okay, you sit tight. I'll muster a crew and send them over. Don't worry, Will. I'm sure I'll be just fine. It was the truth, because she had never felt more at ease in her entire life. Maltz paced the now empty radiation lab on the Enterprise. The old Klingon had spent a lot of time alone in recent years, and he was content with his own company. In strode the tall first officer named Riker, and Maltz jumped to attention. "Maltz, you must be getting bored. General Greycore has asked for you to be reassigned to him. Are you ready to go?"
Does a Targ have spikes, Commander?
Riker smiled. "Come on. Let's see if we can squeeze you onto the transporter." They exited the laboratory and strode down the corridor, which seemed oddly quiet.
Commander, where is everyone?
On the planet, getting ready for the wave about 6 hours from now. Down there are more interphase generators than in the whole Romulan Star Empire. Maltz turned to Riker.
Is Leia Brahms still on the planet?
No, I was told she was over on the Sovereign. She didn't want to stay on the planet. When they reached the transporter room, Riker extended his hand. "Consul Maltz, I hope you find peace." The old Klingon gripped Riker's hand forcefully.
Commander Riker, I hope I find war.
Maltz materialized in a much darker, smokier transporter room. Greycore stood before him.
Maltz, the Federation has failed to find the source of this scourge. I called in some favors. Your ship is the Hosh. She is an older attack cruiser, but still valiant. But enough talk. You must go. What is the name of the misguided human who invented this disaster?
Maltz clenched his teeth.
Carol Marcus. If she yet lives, it will not be for long.
Greycore saluted him.
Kapla!
Before Maltz's molecules disappeared in a shimmering curtain of light, he made a promise to Greycore.
I will see you in Sto-vo-kor.
Leia Brahms kept pacing in the quarters she shared with 5 Bolian evacuees on the Sovereign. She didn't really want to tell them that she was responsible for a desperate plan which had a good chance of getting everyone on Myrmidon killed. A young ensign stepped inside and looked around. "Leia Brahms, come with me, please. You are being sent to the Hosh." "The Hosh? What is that?" "A Klingon ship." Thought Leia glumly. I must really be in the doghouse if the Admiral is shipping me off to a Klingon ship. When Leia Brahms materialized on a dark, smoky bridge, a half-dozen sullen Klingon warriors stared suspiciously at her. She was about to ask what she was doing here when the raised command chair in the center of the bridge swiveled around. Maltz grinned at her.
Captain on the bridge. What are your orders, sir?
Now it was Leia's turn to grin. "You did it, Maltz. You got yourself a ship."
"I got us a ship. I've already laid in a course for Saren and the suspected origin point of the Genesis wave. I assume you will want to leave orbit immediately."
"Yes. Take us out of orbit." Her unfamiliar crew were a bit slow to move, so Leia told herself to act more like Admiral Nechayev. "Move it! I've got a blood oath to fulfill. The Hosh is going to go down in history, and in glory." Deanna Troi nearly gagged at the musty smell of all the animals crowded into the sanctuary of the First Mother, along with their owners and what seemed like half the city. Deanna finally had to make her way outside to get some fresh air, even though there was less than 1 hour left before the Genesis wave hit. She was only supposed to stay for another half an hour before returning to the Enterprise. She had witnessed the awful cataclysm once, and once was enough. As she wandered, she heard the sound of voices rising on the twilight breeze. Gathered in the center of a clearing was a group of Bolians numbering about 30, and a half-dozen others were lying on the ground sleeping. The Bolians were passing a large horn around, drinking a dark liquid from it. With a start, Deanna realized that the sleepers on the ground were not sleeping. They were dead. The dark liquid was poison. Without thinking, she charged into their midst. "Stop! Stop! What are you doing?" A large Bolian glowered at her. "This is none of your concern. Haven't you brought enough disaster upon us?" She never saw the rock sailing through the air. It hit her in the head with enough force to knock her to the ground. And Deanna lay there, unconscious, blood streaming from her forehead. Data looked up from the ops console on the Enterprise. "Captain, the last of the Klingon fleet is leaving orbit." Riker paced behind the command chair. "Mr. Data, any sign of the wave?" The android scanned through the information on his console. "Yes, the outmost planet of the solar system has already been transformed. We have 20 minutes until contact." "Riker to Transporter Room 2. Has Counselor Troi come back to the ship yet?" "No, sir. She hasn't reported in or asked for transportation." Riker gave the order. "Transporter Room 2. Lock on to Deanna Troi's comm badge and beam her back immediately." Riker waited for the transporter chief to contact him. "Commander, we beamed back the person wearing her comm badge, but it turns out to be a Bolian child about 8 years old." Riker looked worriedly at Picard, who nodded. "Go ahead and investigate, number one. But get back here in time." In the transporter room, Riker walked over and knelt down in front of a small, blue-skinned female child. Smiling, he pointed to the insignia badge. "That's a very pretty pen. Where did you get it?" The child was about to cry. "My mother gave it to me. I want to go home." Riker nodded slowly. Now it was making sense. Some distraught parent had hit upon a clever way of saving her child, if not herself. He steered the child toward an empty transporter pad. "Why don't you go stand over here? And I'll just stand over here, and the nice man will take us home. Energize, Chief." On the surface of Myrmidon, tricorder in hand, Geordi LaForge circled nervously around the 2 interphase generators he had set up in the lowest part of a dry riverbed. Although most of the shelters were in the religious sanctuaries, Dolores Linton had convinced them to put a few in open air. She was now conferring with Bolian dignitaries, along with Admiral Nechayev. Dolores had been such a stalwart and cheerful presence that Geordi was beginning to feel very fond of the geologist. Geordi noticed that he was wringing his hands nervously, and he quickly dropped them to his side. With a smile, Dolores came over and grabbed one of his hands and gripped it tightly. Admiral Nechayev smiled at them. "As soon as we have 2 minutes left, we'll start the countdown." There was nothing left to say, and all 3 of them gazed anxiously at the deepening auburn sky. On a deserted street of the capital, Riker tried not to drag the little girl, but time was running short. Less than 5 minutes. "Does this look familiar? Is this where your mother gave you that pin?" The girl looked sorrowful. I don't know." Riker gritted his teeth. "Do you know where your mother was going when she left you?" The child nodded. "To the park, I think." "Take me there, and we'll have a party with your mother and all your friends." The little girl nodded and led him down the deserted street. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Captain Picard tapped his comm badge. "Enterprise to Riker. We need you to return." "Captain, we've just reached a park where there are a lot of dead bodies. I need to look through them. It must be the site of a mass suicide. Take the girl back, but give me another few seconds." Before Picard could reply, Data spoke up urgently. "Captain, the Neptune has returned and opened fire on the shelters. Dr. Crusher does not answer our hail." Picard gripped the back of his command chair, hesitant to order the destruction of Beverly's ship. On the planet Myrmidon, the first explosion blew up a mammoth chunk of the dry riverbed, along with scores of innocent Bolians. Geordi instinctively dove on top of the interphase generators in order to protect them. Without hesitation, he threw the switch to initiate phase shifting, even though they were over a minute early. Admiral Nachaya and Dolores Linton were lying on the ground amidst dozens of other casualties. Some of the Bolians were fleeing from the deadly explosions, running out of the field of protection. Geordi tried to yell at them to stop, but his ragged voice was lost in screams, chaos, and explosions. Captain Picard rousted himself from his momentary hesitation. Data. Pursue the Neptune. Full impulse. Tactical. Target phasers on their impulse engines and fire at will. Transporter Room 1. As soon as we get into range, lock on to the life forms on the starship Neptune and beam them aboard. Transporter Room 2. Lock on to Commander Riker and the Bolian girl right now and beam them aboard. The ship's computer broadcast the final phase of the countdown, while the Genesis wave streaked ever closer as the Enterprise's phasers fired.
26, 25, 24.
In the park, Riker hauled the girl from corpse to corpse, looking for anyone among the bodies who wasn't Bolian. He finally spotted her by her mane of dark hair. Clutching the girl in one hand, he fell on top of Deanna's unconscious body, trying to protect her from the blasts. In the same instant, all three of their bodies dematerialized in a shimmering haze. From his station on the bridge, Data announced to Picard, "Captain, we are leaving orbit." On the view screen, the Neptune soared toward the planet, no longer firing indiscriminately, but in flames. Picard wanted to rush down to the transporter room and find what had caused Beverly and her crew to lose their minds. But he couldn't tear his eyes away from the planet. A pulsing wall of flame ripped over the yellow-green plains and blue rivers, turning them into great pillars of steam and ash. The whole planet quivered and throbbed like a sun-going nova. It could be days before they knew how many had been saved, if any. They had made their stand on Myrmidon, but there was no way anyone could call this a victory. In a few more days, Earth would fall, and they still had no idea who was doing this to them, or how to stop it. The Genesis wave rushed onward, undiminished, its voracious appetite still eager to consume more worlds, more solar systems, and more lives.
To be continued in Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Genesis Wave, Part 2. Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Genesis Wave was written by John Vornholt and read by Tim Russ. It was abridged for audio by George Truitt. It was recorded at Mark Grau Recording in Burbank, California. The recording engineer was Jeremy Gazowski. Computer voice was read by Deborah Gregory. Digital editing by Steven Strassman. Sound design, production mix, and mastering by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Carl Schurtz, Yves Baglarian, Carl Sharif, Richard Emmett, and Sam McCallie. The associate producer was Will Carlino. Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Genesis Wave was directed and produced by Linda Ross of One Louder. This has been a Simon & Schuster audio presentation.